close your eyes for a moment and imagine the ocean. Not the gentle, sun-dappled surface you see from the shore, not the postcard beaches or the playful dolphins arcing through turquoise waves. Imagine the deep. The black, crushing, infinite deep. Now imagine what lives there. What has always lived there. Because for more than 500 million years, the sea has been a killing field. Every era of life on this planet has produced monsters in the water, creatures so perfectly engineered for destruction that they make the great white shark look like a minnow. From armored fish with jaws that could shatter bone, to sea scorpions longer than a man is tall, to reptilian leviathans that ruled the oceans for 100 million years, the deadliest predators in Earth's history have almost always come from the same place. The ocean. This is their story. Every jaw. Every tooth. Every claw. Every kill. This is the history of the deadliest waters on Earth. Please let us know in the comments where you are watching this history video and what time you are watching it. And be sure to subscribe to the channel for future videos. To understand the predators that have dominated our oceans, we must first understand the ocean itself. Not as it is today, but as it was in the beginning. Because the sea is older than life. It is older than the continents as we know them. It is, in a very real sense, the cradle from which all complex life emerged, and it has been the arena in which the most dramatic evolutionary arms races have played out for over 500 million years. The story begins in a world that would be utterly unrecognizable to us. If you could travel back in time roughly 540 million years, you would find yourself standing on a barren, lifeless landmass. There would be no trees, no grass, no insects buzzing in the air, no birds, no mammals, nothing. The continents were empty wastelands of rock and sand, battered by wind and rain, devoid of anything we would recognize as life. But the ocean, the vast, warm, shallow seas that covered much of the planet's surface, those waters were teeming. They were alive in ways that defy imagination. And within those waters, something extraordinary was happening. Something that would change the trajectory of life on Earth forever. This was the dawn of the Cambrian period, and it was the moment when life exploded. Scientists call it the Cambrian Explosion, and the name is fitting. In a relatively short span of geological time, perhaps as little as 20 million years, the oceans went from being populated by simple, soft-bodied organisms, things like jellyfish and worms and algal mats, to being filled with an astonishing diversity of complex, multicellular creatures. Creatures with eyes. Creatures with shells. Creatures with claws. And most importantly for our story, creatures with the ability to hunt, to kill, and to eat other creatures. This was the birth of predation as we know it. Before the Cambrian, life was largely passive. Organisms filtered nutrients from the water, absorbed chemicals from the seafloor, or simply drifted along with the currents. But the Cambrian changed everything. Suddenly, there were animals that actively pursued and consumed other animals. And with that single evolutionary innovation, the arms race began. An arms race that has never stopped. An arms race that continues to this day, in every ocean on the planet. The Cambrian seas were shallow, warm, and filled with bizarre creatures that look like nothing alive today. If you could somehow dive into those ancient waters, you would find yourself surrounded by animals that seemed to have been designed by a surrealist painter. Creatures with 5 eyes. Creatures with dozens of legs. Creatures with long, flexible proboscises tipped with spines. The Cambrian was an era of wild experimentation, a time when evolution was trying out every possible body plan, every possible strategy for survival. But even in this carnival of strange forms, one creature stood above the rest. One animal was the undisputed ruler of the Cambrian seas. And its name tells you everything you need to know about it. Anomalocaris. The name means abnormal shrimp. A hopelessly inadequate title for an animal that was the most terrifying predator its world had ever seen. When scientists first discovered fragments of Anomalocaris in the fossil record, they didn't even realize they were looking at a single animal. The circular mouth, lined with hardened plates, was initially classified as a jellyfish. The grasping appendages were thought to be the bodies of shrimp. It took decades of detective work before paleontologists realized that all of these fragments belonged to one creature, and that creature was a nightmare. Anomalocaris could reach lengths of over 3 feet, which might not sound impressive by modern standards, but in the Cambrian seas, where most animals measured in inches or even centimeters, it was a colossus. Imagine a world where the largest living thing is the size of your thumb, and then imagine something the size of a large dog swimming through that world, hunting everything in sight. That was Anomalocaris. It was the Cambrian equivalent of a great white shark cruising through a school of sardines. But Anomalocaris was just the beginning. The Cambrian produced an even more formidable predator, one that took the basic design of Anomalocaris and refined it into something even more deadly. This was the Omnidens, and it was the true apex predator of the Cambrian period. The Omnidens belonged to a group of animals called the radiodonts, a family of large, swimming predators that dominated the early oceans. Like its relative Anomalocaris, the Omnidens had a streamlined body built for speed, large compound eyes that gave it exceptional vision, and a pair of powerful grasping appendages at the front of its head. But what set the Omnidens apart was its mouth. While Anomalocaris had a circular mouth lined with plates that could crush soft-bodied prey, the Omnidens had something far more terrifying. Its mouth was armed with razor-sharp tooth plates, hardened structures that could slice through the toughest shells and exoskeletons of its day. In a world where many animals were evolving armor, developing hard shells and spiny exteriors to protect themselves from predators, the Omnidens evolved the tools to cut right through those defenses. This is one of the fundamental patterns we will see repeated throughout the history of ocean predation. Prey evolves defenses. Predators evolve ways to overcome those defenses. Prey evolves better defenses. Predators evolve even better weapons. It is an endless escalation, a biological arms race that has driven the evolution of some of the most extraordinary and terrifying creatures our planet has ever produced. The Omnidens was a perfect example of this escalation in action. Its tooth plates were not simple, blunt crushing surfaces. They were precisely engineered cutting tools, with edges sharp enough to slice through the hardened exoskeletons of trilobites, those iconic armored arthropods that filled the Cambrian seas by the billions. Fossil evidence suggests that the Omnidens was an active, aggressive hunter, using its large eyes to spot prey from a distance, its powerful swimming appendages to close in quickly, and its grasping arms to seize and position its victims before those devastating tooth plates went to work. The size of the Omnidens is still debated among paleontologists, but estimates suggest it could have reached impressive proportions for its time. Some researchers believe it may have been among the largest arthropods to ever swim the seas, a massive, heavily armed predator that sat unchallenged at the top of the Cambrian food chain. But what made the Omnidens truly significant was not just its size or its weaponry. It was what it represented. The Omnidens was proof that the ocean had become a dangerous place. In the space of a few million years, the seas had gone from being a relatively peaceful environment, where organisms competed mainly for resources, to being a war zone, where the primary challenge facing any animal was not finding food, but avoiding becoming food. This transformation had profound consequences for the evolution of all marine life. The rise of predators like the Omnidens drove an evolutionary explosion among prey species. Animals that had previously had no need for defenses suddenly found themselves under intense selective pressure. Those that evolved shells survived. Those that evolved speed survived. Those that evolved the ability to burrow into the seafloor survived. Those that did none of these things were eaten. The Cambrian seas were a crucible, and the Omnidens was the fire. It, and predators like it, shaped the trajectory of marine evolution for hundreds of millions of years to come. Every shell you see on a beach, every spine on a sea urchin, every ink cloud released by a squid, all of these defensive adaptations trace their origins back to the Cambrian, back to the moment when the first true apex predators began to patrol the seas. But the Cambrian was just the opening act. The world was about to change, and with it, the nature of the predators that ruled the deep. The transition from the Cambrian to the Ordovician period, roughly 485 million years ago, brought sweeping changes to the planet's oceans. Sea levels rose dramatically, flooding vast expanses of the continents and creating enormous, shallow inland seas. The water was warm, the nutrients were plentiful, and life responded with an explosion of diversity that rivaled the Cambrian itself. Scientists sometimes call this the Great Ordovician Biodiversification Event, a somewhat unwieldy name for one of the most spectacular chapters in the history of life on Earth. During the Ordovician, the number of marine animal families roughly tripled. The seafloors became carpeted with dense communities of filter feeders, including vast meadows of bryozoans, fields of crinids, and reefs built by strange, now extinct organisms. Fish were present but still primitive, small jawless creatures that hugged the bottom and fed on detritus. Trilobites continued to diversify and thrive. Brachiopods, animals that resembled clams but were actually quite different, filled ecological niches across the globe. But the real story of the Ordovician, at least for our purposes, was happening above the seafloor. In the open water. Because this was the period when a new dynasty of predators rose to power. A dynasty that would dominate the oceans for hundreds of millions of years. A dynasty that, in modified form, still produces some of the most intelligent and capable predators in the modern ocean. The cephalopods had arrived. Today, cephalopods include octopuses, squid, cuttlefish, and the nautilus. They are among the most remarkable animals on the planet, possessed of intelligence, adaptability, and a stunning array of hunting techniques. But in the Ordovician, cephalopods were something else entirely. They were giants. And the greatest giant of them all was Endoceras. Endoceras was a nautiloid cephalopod, meaning it was related to the modern nautilus, that small, spiral-shelled creature that drifts through the deep waters of the Pacific. But where the nautilus is modest in size, rarely exceeding 10 inches in diameter, Endoceras was anything but modest. This animal carried a massive, cone-shaped shell that could reach staggering lengths. Some estimates place the largest Endoceras specimens at over 30 feet from the tip of the shell to the end of the tentacles. 30 feet. In a world where the average marine animal was measured in inches, Endoceras was a leviathan. Try to picture it. A creature the length of a school bus, encased in a long, straight, tapering shell, gliding through the warm Ordovician seas with slow, deliberate purpose. From the open end of that enormous shell, a mass of muscular tentacles extended, reaching, searching, grasping. And above those tentacles, a pair of large, keen eyes that were among the most sophisticated visual organs in the Ordovician Ocean. Endoceras was a predator, and it was built for the role. Its tentacles were powerful enough to seize and hold struggling prey, and its beak, a hard, parrot-like structure at the center of its tentacle crown, was capable of cracking through shells and exoskeletons with ease. In the Ordovician seas, nothing could challenge it. It was the undisputed apex predator of its age. But what made Endoceras particularly interesting was its shell, and what that shell tells us about the animal's lifestyle. The shell of Endoceras was not just a protective covering. It was a buoyancy device. Like the modern nautilus, Endoceras could control its position in the water column by adjusting the amount of gas and fluid in the chambers of its shell. This gave it an extraordinary advantage over other predators of the time. While most marine animals of the Ordovician were confined to the seafloor, or the shallow waters above it, Endoceras could range freely through the water column, rising and sinking at will, hunting in waters that other predators could not reach. This ability to control its buoyancy also meant that Endoceras could be an ambush predator. It could hover motionless in the water, its long shell oriented vertically, waiting for unsuspecting prey to swim within reach of its tentacles. Then, with a sudden burst of jet propulsion, pushing water through its siphon, it could lunge forward and seize its victim. The attack would have been swift, decisive, and almost impossible to escape. The prey available to Endoceras was abundant and varied. The Ordovician seas were filled with potential meals. Trilobites, some of which had grown to considerable sizes themselves, would have been a staple food. So too would smaller cephalopods, the numerous smaller nautiloid species that swam alongside Endoceras in the ancient seas. And the primitive jawless fish that were beginning to diversify during this period would have been easy pickings for a predator of this size and capability. But Endoceras was not alone in the Ordovician seas. It was the largest and most formidable of the nautiloid predators, but it was part of a broader radiation of cephalopods that was transforming the ocean's food webs. Dozens of nautiloid species patrolled the Ordovician waters, ranging from small, agile forms that darted through coral reefs to massive, slow-moving giants that cruised the open ocean. Together, they formed a predatory guild that was without precedent in the history of life. The rise of the cephalopods in the Ordovician had profound effects on the evolution of marine life. Just as the radiodonts of the Cambrian had driven the evolution of defensive adaptations in their prey, the cephalopods of the Ordovician pushed their prey to evolve new strategies for survival. Trilobites developed increasingly elaborate spines and enrolled postures, curling into tight balls to protect their soft undersides. Brachiopods developed thicker shells. Small fish developed faster swimming speeds and more sensitive lateral line systems, allowing them to detect the approach of a predator and flee before it was too late. The Ordovician was also a time of significant environmental change. As the period progressed, the climate began to cool. Ice sheets formed at the southern pole, sea levels dropped, and the great shallow seas that had been the cradle of Ordovician life began to drain away. The result was one of the most devastating mass extinctions in Earth's history, the late Ordovician extinction, which wiped out roughly 85% of all marine species. The extinction hit the cephalopods hard. Many of the great nautiloid lineages were driven to extinction, their shells littering the seafloors and vast fossil graveyards. But the cephalopods were resilient. Some lineages survived the extinction, and in the aftermath, they diversified once again, giving rise to new forms that would continue to play a major role in ocean ecosystems for hundreds of millions of years. But even as the cephalopods were recovering from the Ordovician extinction, a new and terrifying group of predators was rising in the seas. A group that would take the concept of the marine predator to an entirely new level of lethality. The Silurian period began approximately 443 million years ago, in the aftermath of the great Ordovician extinction. The world was recovering. Ice sheets were retreating, sea levels were rising, and life was beginning to fill the ecological vacancies left by the extinction. It was a time of rebuilding and renewal, and among the most spectacular of the new arrivals were the Eurypterids. We know them by a more evocative name: sea scorpions. The Eurypterids were arthropods, members of the same vast phylum that includes insects, spiders, crabs, and the trilobites of the earlier periods. But while their relatives were mostly small and unassuming, the Eurypterids were anything but. They were large, they were armored, and they were absolutely lethal. The most formidable of all the sea scorpions was Jaekelopterus, an animal that holds a distinction that should send a shiver down the spine of anyone who has ever waded into the ocean. Jaekelopterus was, as far as we know, the largest arthropod that has ever lived. Estimates based on fossil evidence suggest that this creature could reach lengths of over 8 feet. 8 feet of armored, clawed, predatory arthropod, cruising through the shallow seas and brackish estuaries of the Silurian world. But it was not Jaekelopterus alone that defined the age of the sea scorpions. The Silurian produced a remarkable diversity of Eurypterids, and among the most successful was a creature that combined size, armor, and predatory efficiency in a package that was nothing short of terrifying. This was Pterygotus, sometimes referred to in older literature as Acuteramus or related forms, but the lineage that truly epitomized the sea scorpion dynasty was the group that included the giants. And among those giants, the one that best represents the pinnacle of Eurypterid evolution was the creature that thrived in both marine and freshwater environments, an armored arthropod that could hunt in the open ocean and then follow its prey into rivers and estuaries. These sea scorpions, particularly the larger species, were built like underwater tanks. Their bodies were covered in a tough exoskeleton made of chitin, the same material that forms the shells of modern crabs and lobsters. This armor protected them from the attacks of other predators and from the defensive spines and shells of their prey. But the armor was not rigid. It was jointed and flexible, allowing the sea scorpions to move with surprising speed and agility through the water. The most striking feature of many sea scorpions was their claws. The large chelicerae, or pincer-like appendages, at the front of the body were formidable weapons. In some species, these claws were enormous, accounting for a significant fraction of the animal's total length. They were tipped with sharp, tooth-like denticles that could grip and tear flesh with devastating efficiency. When a sea scorpion seized its prey in those massive claws, escape was virtually impossible. But the sea scorpions were not just ambushed predators lying in wait on the seafloor. Many species were active swimmers, using their flattened, paddle-like rear legs to propel themselves through the water with surprising speed. They could cruise along the bottom, searching for prey among the rocks and sediment, or they could launch themselves into the water column to pursue fish and other fast-moving targets. The versatility of the sea scorpions was one of their greatest strengths. Unlike many of the predators that came before them, which were confined to specific marine environments, the eurypterids were able to exploit a wide range of habitats. Some species lived in the open ocean. Others preferred the shallow, nearshore waters. Still others thrived in brackish estuaries and freshwater rivers. This adaptability allowed them to dominate multiple ecosystems simultaneously, ensuring that no matter where a potential prey animal tried to hide, there was likely a sea scorpion waiting for it. The Silurian seas were a dangerous place, and the sea scorpions were the primary reason why. Their presence at the top of the food chain drove the evolution of new defensive strategies among their prey. Fish, which were still relatively small and primitive during the Silurian, began to develop heavier armor, covering their bodies in thick, bony plates that offered some protection against the crushing claws of the eurypterids. Other animals evolved speed, developing more powerful swimming muscles and more streamlined body shapes that allowed them to outrun their pursuers. But perhaps the most significant evolutionary response to the sea scorpions was the development of the jaw. Prior to the Silurian, fish were jawless, relying on simple, sucker-like mouths to feed on detritus and small particles. But during the Silurian, a revolutionary new group of fish appeared. These were the gnathostomes, the jawed fish, and their appearance would change the history of life on Earth in ways that the sea scorpions could never have anticipated. The evolution of the jaw was one of the most consequential innovations in the history of vertebrates. A jaw allowed a fish to bite, to grasp, to crush, and to tear. It transformed fish from passive bottom feeders into active predators capable of competing with the arthropods that had dominated the seas for so long. And while the jawed fish of the Silurian were still small and relatively insignificant compared to the great sea scorpions, they carried within them the genetic potential for something extraordinary. The age of the sea scorpions would not last forever. The eurypterids had their time in the sun, and they ruled the shallow seas with an iron claw for millions of years. But the seeds of their downfall were already being sown in the Silurian period, planted by those small, seemingly insignificant jawed fish that darted among the rocks, avoiding the great claws of their arthropod overlords. Because the fish were evolving, and they were about to become something truly terrifying. The Devonian period, which began approximately 419 million years ago, is known by a nickname that tells you everything you need to know about what happened during this extraordinary chapter of Earth's history. They call it the Age of Fish. And for good reason. During the Devonian, fish underwent an evolutionary radiation that was nothing short of spectacular. They diversified into an astonishing array of forms, filling ecological niches across the world's oceans, rivers, and lakes. Sharks made their first appearance. Bony fish began their long march toward becoming the dominant vertebrates in the ocean. Lobe-finned fish, the ancestors of all land vertebrates, including us, took their first tentative steps onto solid ground. But the most formidable creatures of the Devonian seas were not the sharks, not the bony fish, and certainly not the small, struggling amphibians that were beginning to crawl out of the water. The true rulers of the Devonian Ocean belonged to a group called the placoderms, and among the placoderms, one species stands above all others as one of the most terrifying predators in the entire history of life on Earth. Dunkleosteus. Even the name sounds like a threat. Dunkleosteus turelli was a monster. There is no other word for it. This was a fish that could reach lengths of over 20 feet, with some estimates suggesting that the largest individuals may have been even bigger. It weighed over a ton. And it was covered, from the tip of its snout to the middle of its body, in thick, interlocking plates of bone that formed an armor so formidable that nothing in the Devonian Ocean could penetrate it. But the armor was not the most terrifying thing about Dunkleosteus. What made this animal truly nightmarish was its mouth. Dunkleosteus did not have teeth. Not in the conventional sense. Instead, it had something arguably worse. The bones of its jaw were shaped into massive, blade-like plates that functioned as self-sharpening cutting edges. Every time Dunkleosteus closed its mouth, these bone plates scraped against each other, honing themselves to a razor-sharp edge. The result was a set of jaws that could slice through virtually anything, including the armor of other placoderms. Biomechanical analysis of Dunkleosteus skulls has revealed that this animal had one of the most powerful bites of any fish that has ever lived. Researchers have calculated that the tip of its jaw could exert a force of over 8,000 pounds per square inch. To put that in perspective, a modern great white shark, one of the most powerful biters in the current ocean, generates a bite force of roughly 4,000 pounds per square inch. Dunkleosteus was literally twice as powerful. But raw bite force was only part of the story. What made Dunkleosteus truly deadly was the speed of its bite. Studies of the jaw mechanics have shown that Dunkleosteus could open and close its mouth in approximately 1/50th of a second. That is faster than the blink of a human eye. When Dunkleosteus attacked, its jaws would snap shut with explosive speed and devastating force, creating a powerful suction effect that would draw prey into its mouth even as the bone plates sliced through flesh and bone. This combination of speed, power, and cutting efficiency made Dunkleosteus one of the most effective killing machines the ocean has ever produced. Nothing in the Devonian seas was safe from it. Sharks, other placoderms, cephalopods, fish of all kinds, everything was potential prey. And the fossil record bears this out. Dunkleosteus fossils have been found with the remains of other large fish in their stomach regions, confirming that this was an active predator of sizable prey. Even more telling, some Dunkleosteus fossils show bite marks from other Dunkleosteus individuals, suggesting that these animals were not above attacking and eating members of their own species. Cannibalism is not uncommon among apex predators. When you are at the top of the food chain, sometimes the only thing big enough to constitute a meal is another member of your own kind. The ecological impact of Dunkleosteus on the Devonian seas was immense. As the undisputed apex predator, it shaped the evolution of virtually every other marine animal of its time. Fish that shared the ocean with Dunkleosteus evolved in response to its predatory pressure, developing faster swimming speeds, more effective camouflage, and in some cases, their own formidable weapons and armor. The arms race between predator and prey during the Devonian reached new heights of intensity. The sea scorpions, which had dominated the earlier periods, found themselves increasingly outmatched by the jawed fish. While some eurypterid species survived into the Devonian, they were no longer the apex predators they had once been. The age of the arthropod predator was coming to an end, replaced by the age of the vertebrate predator. And Dunkleosteus was the herald of this new era. But Dunkleosteus was more than just a predator. It was a symbol of a fundamental shift in the balance of power in the ocean. For the first time in Earth's history, vertebrates, animals with backbones, had risen to the very top of the marine food chain. And they would never relinquish that position. From the Devonian onward, the apex predators of the ocean would almost always be vertebrates, fish, reptiles, mammals. The age of the arthropod ruler was over, and the age of the vertebrate ruler had begun. The Devonian period ended with another mass extinction, the late Devonian extinction, which unfolded in a series of pulses over several million years. The causes are still debated, but the effects were devastating. The placoderms, including Dunkleosteus, were wiped out entirely. The sea scorpions suffered further losses. Reef ecosystems collapsed. The ocean was, once again, thrown into chaos. But as always, life recovered. And when it did, new predators rose to fill the vacancies left by the fallen giants. The Carboniferous period began roughly 359 million years ago, and it brought with it a world that was dramatically different from the Devonian. The continents were converging, slowly assembling into the supercontinent of Pangaea. Vast coal swamps covered the tropical lowlands, filled with giant insects and the first true forests. The air was thick with oxygen, perhaps as much as 35%, compared to today's 21%. But our focus remains in the ocean, and the Carboniferous seas were home to some of the strangest and most unsettling predators in the history of the deep. With the placoderms gone, the sharks inherited the ocean. And in the Carboniferous, sharks were experimenting wildly with body plans and jaw configurations, producing forms that were bizarre beyond imagination. Among the most extraordinary of these experimental sharks was Edestus, an animal so strange that it has earned the nickname, the scissor-toothed shark. Edestus was a large shark, potentially reaching lengths of over 20 feet. But it was not its size that made it remarkable. It was its teeth. Or rather, the way its teeth were arranged. Most sharks, both ancient and modern, have multiple rows of teeth arranged in their jaws, with new teeth constantly growing in to replace those that are lost. This conveyor belt system ensures that a shark always has a mouthful of sharp, functional teeth ready for action. But Edestus did something entirely different. Instead of replacing its teeth in the conventional manner, Edestus grew its teeth in a single, continuous row along each jaw. As new teeth grew in at the back of the jaw, they pushed the older teeth forward, creating a curved, protruding row of blade-like teeth that extended out from the front of the mouth. The upper jaw had one such row of teeth curving upward, and the lower jaw had another row curving downward. The result was a jaw arrangement that looked like nothing else in the natural world, a pair of serrated, curved blades, one pointing up and one pointing down, forming a structure that resembled a massive pair of pinking shears. How Edestus used this extraordinary dental arrangement is a subject of considerable debate among paleontologists. Some researchers have suggested that Edestus used its protruding tooth rows in a slashing motion, swimming at speed toward its prey and then snapping its jaws together, using the curved tooth rows like a pair of scissors to slice through flesh and bone. This would have been a devastating attack, capable of inflicting massive, lethal wounds with a single strike. Others have proposed that Edestus used its teeth more like a saw, raking them across the body of a large prey animal to create deep gashes that would weaken and ultimately kill the victim. Still others have suggested that the teeth may have been used in display or combat between individuals, similar to the way modern deer use their antlers. Whatever the precise function, there is no question that Edestus was a formidable predator. Its large size, combined with its unique and presumably highly effective jaw structure, would have made it a dominant force in the Carboniferous seas. The fossil record shows that Edestus shared its world with a variety of other sharks and fish, but its size and weaponry would have placed it near or at the top of the food chain in its marine ecosystem. The Carboniferous also saw the diversification of other shark lineages, including the ancestors of the modern shark groups that dominate today's oceans. But it was the strange, experimental forms like Edestus that truly defined the period's predatory landscape. The Carboniferous was a time of innovation, a time when evolution was exploring the boundaries of what was possible in the design of a marine predator. And among all the strange designs that the Carboniferous produced, none was stranger or more spectacular than the one that appeared in the next period, the Permian. The Permian period began approximately 299 million years ago, and it was the last chapter of the Paleozoic era, the vast stretch of geological time that had begun with the Cambrian Explosion. The Permian world was dominated by the supercontinent Pangaea, a single, enormous landmass that stretched from pole to pole, surrounded by a single, vast ocean called Panthalassa. The seas of the Permian were warm, productive, and filled with an abundance of marine life. Brachiopods and crinids dominated the seafloor. Ammonites, the coiled shell relatives of the modern nautilus, were diversifying rapidly. And in the open waters, sharks continued to evolve and diversify, producing some of the most remarkable forms in the long history of the chondrichthyes. The most spectacular of these Permian sharks was an animal that has captivated scientists and the public alike since its discovery. An animal whose most distinctive feature has been the subject of debate, confusion, and wonder for over a century. Its name is Helicoprion, or more accurately for our purposes, the closely related and perhaps even more formidable Parahelicoprion. And its signature feature was a structure so bizarre, so apparently impossible, that scientists initially could not agree on what it was or where on the animal's body it was located. It was a tooth whorl. A spiral of teeth, coiled like a circular saw blade, embedded in the lower jaw of the shark. Imagine a buzzsaw, but made of teeth, sharp, triangular, serrated teeth, arranged in a tight spiral that grew throughout the animal's life. As new teeth formed at the center of the spiral, older teeth were pushed outward, creating a continuously growing wheel of cutting edges. When scientists first discovered fossils of this tooth whorl in the late 19th century, they had no idea what to make of it. Some thought it was a defensive structure, a coiled spine attached to the shark's dorsal fin. Others thought it was a feeding appendage, like the trunk of an elephant, that the shark used to sweep food toward its mouth. Still others thought it was a weapon mounted on the shark's tail. It was not until advanced imaging techniques, including CT scanning of exceptionally preserved fossils, that scientists were finally able to determine the true position and function of the tooth whorl. It was, in fact, located in the lower jaw of the shark, and it functioned as a kind of built-in food processor. When the shark closed its mouth, the tooth whorl would roll backward, like a gear, slicing through prey with the efficiency of a rotary saw. The implications of this feeding mechanism are staggering. The tooth whorl of Helicoprion was not just a set of teeth. It was a machine, a biological device for processing prey that was unlike anything else in the history of life. No other animal, before or since, has evolved anything comparable. It was a unique solution to the challenge of predation, and it was devastatingly effective. Helicoprion was a large shark, potentially reaching lengths of 20 feet or more. In the warm, productive seas of the Permian, it would have been a dominant predator, feeding on the abundant ammonites, fish, and other marine animals that filled its world. The tooth whorl would have allowed it to process prey with remarkable efficiency, slicing through shells, flesh, and bone with each revolution of the spiral. Some researchers have suggested that the tooth whorl was particularly well suited for feeding on ammonites and other shelled cephalopods. The spiral of teeth would have been able to crack open the coiled shells of these animals, extracting the soft, nutritious body within. This would have given Helicoprion access to a food source that was abundant, widespread, and well protected, making it one of the most successful predators of its time. The tooth whorl of Helicoprion is also significant because it tells us something important about the nature of evolution itself. Evolution does not always produce simple, elegant solutions. Sometimes it produces structures that are complex, baroque, and seemingly over-engineered. The tooth whorl of Helicoprion is a prime example. It was not a simple jaw with teeth. It was a complex, multi-component mechanism that required the precise coordination of bone, muscle, and cartilage to function effectively. And yet it worked. For millions of years, it worked beautifully, making Helicoprion one of the most successful predators in the Permian Ocean. But the Permian was not destined to last forever. And when it ended in the most catastrophic way imaginable. The end of the Permian period, approximately 252 million years ago, brought with it the worst mass extinction in Earth's history. The Permian Triassic extinction event, sometimes called the Great Dying, wiped out roughly 90 to 96% of all marine species. The causes were complex, involving massive volcanic eruptions, rapid climate change, ocean acidification, and widespread anoxia, the depletion of oxygen from the ocean waters. The extinction was a holocaust for marine life. Entire groups of organisms were obliterated. The trilobites, which had survived every previous extinction event, finally succumbed. The great forests of crinids that had carpeted the seafloor were virtually wiped out. The eurypterids, already in decline, were driven to final extinction. The diverse communities of brachiopods, corals, and other sessile organisms that had formed the backbone of Paleozoic marine ecosystems were devastated. And the sharks suffered terribly. Many of the bizarre, experimental lineages of the Carboniferous and Permian, including the Helicoprionids and their relatives, were driven to extinction. The tooth whorls, which had been such a successful innovation, disappeared from the fossil record entirely. The ocean was emptied. The great predators of the Paleozoic era were gone. And for a time, the seas were a desolate, nearly lifeless wasteland. But life is resilient. Life always finds a way. And in the aftermath of the Great Dying, the ocean began to heal. Slowly, painfully, new communities of organisms began to assemble. New ecological relationships formed. New predators emerged. And this time, the predators that rose to dominance would be unlike anything the ocean had ever seen before. The Triassic period began in the shadow of the greatest catastrophe in the history of life. The first few million years of the Triassic were grim, a time of slow recovery, ecological instability, and dramatically reduced biodiversity. The oceans were warm, oxygen poor in many regions, and dominated by a relatively small number of survivor species. It was, in many ways, a blank canvas, wiped clean by the Great Dying and waiting for evolution to paint something new upon it. And what evolution painted was extraordinary. The Triassic saw the rise of a group of animals that would dominate the world's oceans for the next 186 million years. A group that would produce some of the largest, most powerful, and most spectacular marine predators in the entire history of life. A group that, unlike the fish and arthropods that had preceded them, breathed air, had 4 limbs modified into flippers, and gave birth to live young in the open sea. The marine reptiles had arrived. It is worth pausing for a moment to appreciate just how remarkable this development was. Reptiles are, fundamentally, land animals. They evolved on land, they breathe air, and their ancestors walked on 4 legs. Yet during the Triassic, multiple lineages of reptiles independently abandoned the land and returned to the sea, evolving streamlined bodies, paddle-like limbs, and other adaptations for an aquatic lifestyle. It was one of the most dramatic ecological transitions in the history of vertebrate evolution, and it happened not once, but several times, in several different reptile groups, over the course of a few million years. The first marine reptiles to appear in the Triassic were relatively small and modest, resembling modern marine iguanas or large lizards that spent part of their time in the water. But evolution works quickly when ecological opportunities are abundant, and the emptied post-extinction ocean offered the most abundant ecological opportunities imaginable. Within a few million years, marine reptiles had diversified into an astonishing array of forms, ranging from small, eel-like swimmers to massive, whale-like giants. Among the most important groups of Triassic marine reptiles were the ichthyosaurs, which evolved a body shape remarkably similar to modern dolphins, with streamlined bodies, dorsal fins, and powerful tails for propulsion. The ichthyosaurs were among the first marine reptiles to become truly pelagic, venturing far from shore into the open ocean to hunt fish and cephalopods. And among the ichthyosaurs, one species stands out as potentially the largest marine reptile, perhaps the largest marine animal, that has ever lived. Ichthyodon. The name means fish titan, and it is entirely appropriate. Ichthyodon asiaciensis was described from fossil remains found in rock formations dating to the late Triassic, and the initial size estimates have stunned the paleontological community. Based on comparisons with related ichthyosaurs, some researchers have suggested that Ichthyodon could have reached lengths of over 80 feet. 80 feet. That would make it comparable in size to the modern blue whale, the largest animal currently alive on Earth. Imagine this animal. A reptile, an air-breathing reptile, longer than 2 school buses placed end to end, cruising through the warm Triassic seas. Its body was shaped like a torpedo, perfectly streamlined for efficient swimming over long distances. Its 4 limbs had been transformed into broad, flat flippers that it used for steering and stability. Its tail, like that of a modern tuna or shark, was a powerful crescent-shaped fin that drove it through the water with smooth, powerful strokes. But unlike the blue whale, which feeds on tiny krill by filtering enormous volumes of water through its baleen plates, Ichthyodon was a predator. Its jaws were lined with teeth or, in some ichthyosaur lineages, with robust crushing surfaces adapted for seizing and processing large prey. It hunted in the open ocean, pursuing the large fish, cephalopods, and smaller marine reptiles that shared its world. The existence of Ichthyodon tells us something profound about the capacity of marine ecosystems to support enormous predators. In the aftermath of the worst mass extinction in Earth's history, in seas that had been nearly emptied of life, evolution produced an animal that may have been the largest marine predator ever to exist. It is a testament to the productivity of the ocean and to the relentless drive of natural selection to fill every available ecological niche, no matter how extreme. But Ichthyodonton was not the only large ichthyosaur of the Triassic. The period produced a remarkable diversity of these marine reptiles, ranging from small, fast-swimming species that hunted fish near the surface to massive, deep-diving forms that pursued giant squid in the inky depths. Some ichthyosaurs evolved enormous eyes, among the largest of any vertebrate in Earth's history, adapted for hunting in low-light conditions at great depths. Others developed powerful jaws lined with robust teeth, capable of crushing the shells of ammonites and other hard-shelled prey. The Triassic also saw the appearance of other important groups of marine reptiles. The nothosaurs, long-necked predators that hunted fish in shallow coastal waters, were among the most common marine reptiles of the early Triassic. The placodonts, heavily armored reptiles that fed on shellfish, occupied a niche similar to modern walruses. And the thalattosaurs, a diverse group of marine reptiles with elongated bodies and flattened tails, filled a variety of ecological roles in Triassic seas. But perhaps the most significant development of the Triassic, from the perspective of predatory evolution, was the appearance of the plesiosaurs. Or rather, the ancestors of the plesiosaurs, because the true plesiosaurs would not fully diversify until the Jurassic period. But the groundwork was being laid during the Triassic, as the ancestors of these remarkable animals began to adapt to life in the sea, developing the long necks, powerful flippers, and robust bodies that would characterize the group for more than 100 million years. The Triassic world was a world in transition. The old Paleozoic order had been swept away by the Great Dying, and a new order was taking shape. On land, the first dinosaurs were beginning to appear, small, agile predators that would one day grow to become the largest land animals in Earth's history. In the sea, the marine reptiles were establishing their dominance, replacing the fish and arthropods that had ruled the Paleozoic oceans. And as the Triassic gave way to the Jurassic, the marine reptiles would reach their zenith. The Jurassic seas would be ruled by predators so powerful, so perfectly adapted for their role, that they would stand as some of the most formidable killing machines the ocean has ever produced. The Jurassic period began approximately 201 million years ago, following another mass extinction event at the end of the Triassic. The end-Triassic extinction was not as severe as the Great Dying, but it was devastating nonetheless, wiping out roughly 80% of all species and clearing the way for the dinosaurs to dominate the land and the marine reptiles to consolidate their control of the seas. The Jurassic world was warm, wet, and lush. Sea levels were high, flooding large portions of the continents, and creating vast shallow seas that teemed with life. The climate was tropical or subtropical across much of the globe, with no permanent ice caps at the poles. The oceans were warm from surface to floor, creating ideal conditions for marine life to flourish. And flourish it did. The Jurassic seas were among the most productive in Earth's history, filled with an abundance of fish, cephalopods, crustaceans, and other marine organisms. Coral reefs, which had been devastated by the end-Triassic extinction, began to rebuild, creating complex underwater habitats that supported dense communities of marine life. But the Jurassic seas were also among the most dangerous. Because the marine reptiles that had first appeared in the Triassic had now reached the peak of their evolutionary development, producing predators that were larger, faster, and more powerful than anything the ocean had seen before. The ichthyosaurs continued to thrive during the Jurassic, though many of the giant forms of the Triassic had been replaced by smaller, more agile species that were better adapted for pursuing fast-moving prey in the open ocean. These Jurassic ichthyosaurs were remarkably dolphin-like in their body plan, with streamlined bodies, large eyes, and powerful tails that allowed them to reach speeds of over 25 miles per hour. They were formidable predators in their own right, but they were no longer the undisputed rulers of the sea. That title had passed to a new group of marine reptiles. A group that combined massive size with extraordinary power and aggression. A group that would dominate the world's oceans for the next 80 million years. The plesiosaurs. The plesiosaurs were a diverse group of marine reptiles that first appeared in the late Triassic and reached their peak of diversity and abundance during the Jurassic and Cretaceous periods. They came in two basic body plans. The first, the plesiosauromorph body plan, featured a long neck, a small head, and a relatively small body, an arrangement well suited for catching fish and small cephalopods. The second, the pliosauromorph body plan, was something else entirely. The pliosaurs were the heavy hitters of the Jurassic seas. Where the long-necked plesiosaurs were graceful, elegant swimmers that used stealth and precision to catch their prey, the pliosaurs were brute-force predators that overwhelmed their victims with sheer size and power. And among the pliosaurs, one animal stands out as the most terrifying marine predator of the Jurassic period, and arguably one of the most terrifying marine predators of all time. Pliosaurus. The genus Pliosaurus includes several species, but the most famous is the specimen known informally as Predator X, a massive pliosaur discovered in the Arctic archipelago of Svalbard. This animal was a monster by any standard. Estimates based on the fossil remains suggest that Pliosaurus could reach lengths of over 35 to 40 feet, with a skull alone that measured over 6 feet in length. That skull was over 6 feet long. Think about that for a moment. The head of this animal was taller than most adult humans. And that head was built for one thing, and one thing only: killing. The skull of Pliosaurus was massive, robust, and heavily reinforced. The jaw muscles were enormous, attaching to broad, thick areas of bone that provided the leverage necessary to generate extraordinary bite forces. Biomechanical analysis of the Pliosaurus skull suggests that this animal could exert a bite force of over 33,000 pounds, making it one of the most powerful biters in the history of vertebrate life. For comparison, the bite force of a modern saltwater crocodile, one of the most powerful biters alive today, is approximately 3,700 pounds. Pliosaurus was nearly 10 times more powerful. But the bite force was only part of the equation. What made Pliosaurus truly deadly was the combination of that tremendous bite force with a set of teeth that were perfectly designed for the task of killing large prey. The teeth of Pliosaurus were trihedral, meaning they had a triangular cross-section, with 3 distinct ridges running along their length. This geometry gave them exceptional strength and cutting ability. Each tooth was a sturdy, deeply rooted peg of enamel and dentine, capable of puncturing through flesh, muscle, and bone without breaking. When Pliosaurus clamped its jaws around the victim, those trihedral teeth would sink deep into the body, anchoring the prey in place while the enormous jaw muscles exerted crushing, shearing forces that would have been utterly catastrophic. Imagine being a large fish, or a smaller marine reptile, swimming through the Jurassic seas. You are perhaps 20 feet long, a significant animal by any measure. You are swimming near the surface, hunting squid, when suddenly, from the murky depths below, a shadow rises. Fast. Impossibly fast for something so large. Before you can react, a pair of jaws, 6 feet long, lined with triangular teeth the size of bananas, clamp around your midsection. The force is beyond comprehension. Your ribs shatter. Your internal organs are crushed. The teeth drive through your body wall, anchoring you in place. And then the great head shakes, violently, from side to side, tearing enormous chunks of flesh from your body. The water blooms red. And in seconds it is over. That was life and death in the Jurassic seas. Pliosaurus was not just a powerful biter. It was also an efficient swimmer. Its 4 large flippers, each driven by powerful muscles, gave it a unique method of locomotion. Unlike fish, which swim by undulating their tails from side to side, and unlike whales, which swim by moving their tails up and down, plesiosaurs and pliosaurs swam by flying through the water, using their flippers in a manner similar to the way a penguin or a sea turtle uses its flippers. This method of locomotion was not the fastest available, but it was remarkably efficient, allowing Pliosaurus to cover vast distances with minimal energy expenditure. And when it needed a burst of speed, perhaps to close on prey or to launch an attack, it could engage all 4 flippers simultaneously, generating a rapid acceleration that would have been difficult for most prey to evade. The ecological role of Pliosaurus in the Jurassic seas was comparable to that of the orca in modern oceans. It was a generalist apex predator, capable of hunting a wide variety of prey. Fish, cephalopods, smaller marine reptiles, even other pliosaurs, everything was on the menu. Its size and power made it virtually invulnerable to attack by other predators, placing it firmly at the apex of the Jurassic food chain. But Pliosaurus was not the only large marine reptile in the Jurassic seas. The period was home to a remarkable diversity of marine predators, including other pliosaurs, long-necked plesiosaurs, ichthyosaurs, and marine crocodilians. The competition among these predators was intense, and it drove the evolution of increasingly sophisticated hunting strategies, sensory systems, and body plans. The Jurassic seas were, in many ways, the golden age of marine reptile predation. Never before had so many large, powerful, air-breathing predators shared the oceans simultaneously. The diversity and abundance of these animals speaks to the extraordinary productivity of the Jurassic marine environment, which was able to support multiple tiers of large predators at the same time. But the Jurassic was not destined to last forever. As the period drew to a close and gave way to the Cretaceous, the marine reptile fauna underwent significant changes. Some groups, like the ichthyosaurs, began a long, slow decline that would eventually lead to their extinction. Others, like the plesiosaurs and pliosaurs, continued to thrive and diversify. And a new group of marine reptiles was about to explode onto the scene, a group that would come to dominate the Cretaceous seas in a way that no other marine reptile group had ever done before. The Cretaceous period, which began approximately 145 million years ago, was the last and longest period of the Mesozoic era, the Great Age of Reptiles. It was a time of high sea levels, warm climates, and extraordinary biological diversity. The continents were continuing to break apart, creating new ocean basins and seaways that allowed marine life to spread and diversify. The Western Interior Seaway, a vast shallow sea that split one major landmass in two, was home to one of the richest marine ecosystems in Earth's history. And in those warm, teeming waters, a new dynasty of marine predators rose to power. A dynasty that would produce some of the most iconic and terrifying sea creatures of all time. The Mosasaurs. Mosasaurs were marine reptiles, but they were not closely related to the plesiosaurs and pliosaurs that had dominated the Jurassic seas. Instead, mosasaurs were lizards. Specifically, they were closely related to modern monitor lizards and, through them, to snakes. They had evolved from small, semi-aquatic lizards during the early Cretaceous, and by the late Cretaceous, they had diversified into an extraordinary array of forms, ranging from small, fish-eating species a few feet long to massive apex predators that rivaled the great whales in size. The most famous of all mosasaurs, and arguably the most iconic marine predator of the entire Mesozoic era, was Mosasaurus itself. Mosasaurus hoffmanii was a titan. The largest individuals are estimated to have reached lengths of over 50 feet, making them among the largest marine reptiles that have ever lived. They were heavily built, with thick, muscular bodies powered by a long, laterally compressed tail that propelled them through the water with powerful, undulating strokes. Their four limbs had been modified into flippers, short but effective hydrophils that provided stability and maneuverability in the water. But it was the head of Mosasaurus that truly set it apart. The skull was massive, over 5 feet long in the largest specimens, and built like a battering ram. The jaws were lined with large, robust, conical teeth that were designed for one purpose: to seize and hold struggling prey. And unlike many other predators that relied primarily on their main set of jaw teeth, Mosasaurus had an additional set of teeth on the roof of its mouth, on a structure called the pterygoid bone. These secondary teeth pointed backward, toward the throat, and their function was to grip prey that was already in the mouth and prevent it from escaping. Once Mosasaurus had its jaws around a victim, those pterygoid teeth ensured that there was no way out. This double row of teeth, combined with the massive jaw muscles and the sheer size of the animal, made Mosasaurus one of the most effective predators in the history of the ocean. It could take on virtually any prey available to it, including large fish, sharks, sea turtles, ammonites, other marine reptiles, and even smaller mosasaurs. The fossil record provides abundant evidence of the dietary habits of Mosasaurus and its relatives, including fossilized stomach contents containing the remains of fish, turtles, and even other mosasaurs. One of the most impressive aspects of Mosasaurus was its speed. Despite its enormous size, this animal was built for rapid movement through the water. Its tail was a powerful propulsive organ, driving the animal forward with sweeping lateral strokes that generated tremendous thrust. Some researchers have compared the swimming style of Mosasaurus to that of a modern crocodile, but with far greater efficiency and speed. Others have compared it to a modern barracuda, a fast, powerful predator that relies on short bursts of speed to overtake its prey. The mosasaurs as a group were remarkably diverse, and the Cretaceous seas saw them fill a wide range of ecological niches. Some species, like the small and agile Platycarpus, were specialized fish eaters that hunted in the open ocean. Others, like the heavily built Prognathodon, were crushing specialists that fed on hard-shelled prey like sea turtles and ammonites. Still others, like the massive Tylosaurus, were generalist apex predators that hunted anything and everything they could catch. The diversity of the mosasaurs speaks to the richness of the Cretaceous marine environment, which was among the most productive in Earth's history. The warm, high sea levels of the Cretaceous created vast areas of shallow, sunlit water where photosynthetic organisms thrived, supporting a complex food web that extended from microscopic plankton to the giant mosasaurs at the top. But the success of the mosasaurs also tells us something about the nature of marine predation. The mosasaurs were latecomers to the marine reptile game. The ichthyosaurs had been in the sea for over 100 million years before the first mosasaurs appeared. The plesiosaurs and pliosaurs had been dominating the seas since the early Jurassic. And yet, within a relatively short span of geological time, the mosasaurs had risen to become the dominant marine predators, outcompeting and in some cases replacing the established groups. How did they do it? Part of the answer lies in their evolutionary heritage. As descendants of monitor lizards, mosasaurs inherited a suite of characteristics that made them exceptionally well-suited for marine predation. Monitor lizards are among the most intelligent, adaptable, and aggressive of all modern reptiles. They are opportunistic feeders, capable of eating almost anything. They are powerful swimmers. They have highly flexible skulls and jaws that allow them to swallow large prey items whole. All of these characteristics were amplified and refined in the mosasaurs, producing a predator that was supremely adaptable and devastatingly effective. But the mosasaurs also benefited from timing. Their rise to dominance coincided with the decline of the ichthyosaurs, which went extinct during the mid-Cretaceous, and the gradual reduction in diversity of the plesiosaurs and pliosaurs. As these older groups waned, the mosasaurs diversified to fill the ecological spaces they left behind. It was a classic example of evolutionary replacement, one group declining and another rising to take its place. By the late Cretaceous, the mosasaurs were the undisputed rulers of the sea. They had achieved a level of dominance that was unprecedented among marine reptiles. In every ocean on the planet, in every marine habitat from shallow coastal waters to the open pelagic zone, mosasaurs were the top predators. And then, 66 million years ago, it all ended. The asteroid that struck the Yucatan Peninsula at the close of the Cretaceous period was one of the most devastating events in the history of life on Earth. The impact itself was catastrophic, generating an explosion with the energy of billions of nuclear weapons. The immediate aftermath included massive tsunamis, global firestorms, and a rain of superheated debris that would have killed most exposed organisms within hours. But the real killer was not the impact itself. It was the aftermath. The dust and debris thrown into the atmosphere by the impact blocked out sunlight for months, perhaps years. Global temperatures plummeted. Photosynthesis ground to a halt. The food chains that supported all of Earth's ecosystems, both on land and in the sea, collapsed. The mosasaurs, along with the plesiosaurs, the pliosaurs, the ammonites, and of course the non-avian dinosaurs on land, were wiped out entirely. The great age of marine reptile predation, which had lasted for 186 million years, was over. The ocean was, once again, emptied of its apex predators. Once again, life had been knocked down. And once again, a new order of predators would rise from the ashes. The Paleogene period began in the immediate aftermath of the end Cretaceous extinction, 66 million years ago, and it encompassed the first 43 million years of the Cenozoic era, the era in which we currently live. It was a time of profound transformation, both on land and in the sea. On land, mammals, which had spent the entire Mesozoic era as small, inconspicuous creatures living in the shadow of the dinosaurs, suddenly found themselves in a world without large competitors. They diversified with explosive speed, filling the ecological vacancies left by the extinct dinosaurs and evolving into the extraordinary diversity of forms we see today. But the revolution on land was mirrored by an equally dramatic revolution in the sea. Because the mammals did not just diversify on land. Some of them went back to the water. The return of mammals to the sea is one of the most remarkable chapters in the history of evolution. Like the marine reptiles of the Mesozoic, the marine mammals of the Cenozoic evolved from terrestrial ancestors. They abandoned the land, returned to the water, and evolved a suite of adaptations for aquatic life that are every bit as impressive as those of the ichthyosaurs, plesiosaurs, and mosasaurs that preceded them. The first mammals to make this transition were the ancestors of modern whales, a group of animals called the Archaeocetes. And among the Archaeocetes, one species stands out as the most formidable marine predator of the early Cenozoic: Basilosaurus. Despite its name, which means king lizard, and was given by an early paleontologist who mistakenly believed it was a reptile, Basilosaurus was a whale. A primitive whale, to be sure, but a whale nonetheless. It was one of the earliest fully aquatic cetaceans, an animal that had completed the transition from land to sea and was committed to a life in the water. And what an animal it was! Basilosaurus cetoids could reach lengths of over 60 feet, making it one of the largest animals in the Paleogene ocean. Its body was long and serpentine, quite different from the robust, barrel-shaped bodies of modern whales. Its tail was narrow and probably bore small flukes, which it used for propulsion. Its front limbs had been modified into small flippers, and its hind limbs, while still present, had been reduced to tiny, vestigial structures that were invisible from the outside. But the most impressive feature of Basilosaurus was its teeth. Unlike modern toothed whales, which have simple, uniform, conical teeth adapted for grasping slippery fish and squid, Basilosaurus had complex, differentiated teeth. Its front teeth were conical and pointed, well suited for seizing and holding prey. But its cheek teeth were something else entirely. They were large, multicusped, and equipped with sharp, shearing edges that could slice through flesh and bone with precision. This dental arrangement tells us that Basilosaurus was not just a fish-eater. It was a predator of large, powerful prey. The shearing teeth were designed for processing the bodies of other large marine animals, possibly including other cetaceans and large fish. Fossil evidence supports this interpretation. Basilosaurus specimens have been found with the bones of smaller whales, specifically the dolphin-like Dorodon, in their stomach regions, confirming that Basilosaurus was an active predator of other marine mammals. The hunting strategy of Basilosaurus is a subject of ongoing research, but the animal's body plan provides some clues. Its long, sinuous body was not built for sustained high-speed swimming. Instead, it was probably a cruiser, moving through the water with slow, efficient undulations of its elongated body and tail, covering vast distances in search of prey. When it located a target, it could likely accelerate quickly for short bursts, using its powerful tail to close the distance before striking with those formidable jaws. Basilosaurus occupied the ecological niche that had been left vacant by the extinction of the mosasaurs, that of the large, generalist apex predator. And it filled that niche with distinction. In the Paleogene seas, nothing could challenge it. It was the king of the ocean, the successor to the mosasaurs, and the herald of a new age of marine mammal dominance. But the significance of Basilosaurus extends beyond its role as an apex predator. It is significant because it represents a fundamental shift in the identity of the ocean's top predators. For over 180 million years, from the Triassic to the end of the Cretaceous, the apex predators of the ocean had been reptiles. Cold-blooded, air-breathing reptiles that had evolved from terrestrial ancestors and returned to the sea. But with the extinction of the mosasaurs and plesiosaurs, The reptilian dynasty had ended. In its place, a new dynasty was rising. A dynasty of warm-blooded, air-breathing mammals that had, like their reptilian predecessors, evolved from terrestrial ancestors and returned to the sea. It was a remarkable case of evolutionary convergence, two completely unrelated groups of animals independently evolving similar solutions to the same ecological challenges. The whales were, in a very real sense, the Cenozoic version of the ichthyosaurs and mosasaurs, filling the same ecological roles with similar body plans and similar hunting strategies. But there were important differences. The whales were warm-blooded, which gave them significant advantages in terms of sustained activity and the ability to survive in cold waters. They had larger, more complex brains, which gave them more sophisticated behavioral repertoires, including social hunting strategies that were unknown among the marine reptiles. And they had the capacity for vocal communication, which allowed them to coordinate their activities over vast distances. These advantages would serve the whales well in the millions of years to come, as they diversified into the most successful group of marine mammals in history, producing everything from the tiny harbor porpoise to the colossal blue whale. But in the Paleogene, all of that lay in the future. For the moment, Basilosaurus ruled the seas, a primitive but utterly dominant predator, the king of a recovering ocean. The Paleogene gave way to the Neogene period approximately 23 million years ago, and with the Neogene came the most famous, most celebrated, and most feared marine predator in the public imagination. An animal whose name has become synonymous with prehistoric terror. An animal that has inspired countless books, movies, documentaries, and nightmares. An animal that, even millions of years after its extinction, continues to capture the human imagination like few other creatures in the history of life. Odidus Megalodon. The Megalodon. It is impossible to overstate the cultural impact of the Megalodon. This animal has become a modern myth, a legend, a creature that occupies a unique place in the popular consciousness as the ultimate marine predator. And while some of the more extravagant claims about the Megalodon are exaggerated or outright false, the truth is, in many ways, even more impressive than the fiction. The Megalodon was a shark. Specifically, it belonged to the family Odontidae, a group of large, predatory sharks that had been evolving for tens of millions of years before the Megalodon appeared. It was not, as is sometimes claimed, a direct ancestor of the modern great white shark. The two species are only distantly related, belonging to different families within the larger order of mackerel sharks. But the Megalodon was, without question, the apex of shark evolution, the largest and most powerful predatory shark that has ever lived. Determining the exact size of the Megalodon is complicated by the fact that, like all sharks, its skeleton was made primarily of cartilage, which rarely fossilizes. Most of what we know about the Megalodon's size comes from its teeth, which are found in abundance in marine sediments around the world, and from rare finds of vertebral centra, the calcified central portions of the vertebral column. The teeth of the Megalodon are, quite simply, spectacular. They are triangular, serrated, and enormous, with the largest specimens measuring over 7 inches from root to tip. For comparison, the teeth of a modern great white shark rarely exceed 3 inches. The Megalodon's teeth were more than twice as large, and they were built for a specific purpose, cutting through the flesh of large marine mammals, particularly whales. Based on the size of these teeth, and on mathematical models derived from the known proportional relationships between tooth size and body size in modern sharks, researchers have estimated that the largest Megalodon individuals could have reached lengths of 50 to 60 feet, with some estimates suggesting that exceptional individuals may have been even larger. The weight of these animals has been estimated at 50 to 75 tons, making the Megalodon one of the largest predatory animals in the history of life. But size alone does not make a predator. What made the Megalodon truly formidable was the combination of its enormous size with a set of biological tools that were perfectly optimized for hunting the largest prey in the Neogene Ocean. The Megalodon's jaws were immense, gaping maws that could have easily accommodated a modern car. When fully open, the jaw span has been estimated at over 6 feet wide and nearly 5 feet tall. The bite force of the Megalodon has been calculated using biomechanical models, and the results are staggering. Researchers estimate that the Megalodon could exert a bite force of over 40,000 pounds, making it the most powerful biter in the history of any animal, land or sea. With those jaws and those massive, serrated teeth, the Megalodon could take enormous bites out of its prey, removing huge chunks of flesh, bone, and blubber with a single snap. The serrated edges of the teeth would have acted like steak knives, slicing through the tough skin and thick blubber of marine mammals with devastating efficiency. And what was the Megalodon's preferred prey? The answer, supported by extensive fossil evidence, is whales. The Neogene period was the golden age of whale evolution. The oceans were filled with a remarkable diversity of cetaceans, ranging from small, dolphin-like forms to massive baleen whales that rivaled the modern blue whale in size. These whales were the Megalodon's primary food source, and the fossil record provides dramatic evidence of this predatory relationship. Whale bones from Neogene deposits around the world frequently bear the unmistakable marks of Megalodon attacks. Deep, parallel scratches and gouges, the signature of those enormous serrated teeth, scar the surfaces of ribs, vertebrae, and fin bones. In some cases, Megalodon teeth have been found embedded in whale bones, broken off during an attack and preserved in place for millions of years. But perhaps the most telling evidence of the Megalodon's hunting strategy comes from the pattern of bite marks on whale fossils. Analysis of these marks suggests that the Megalodon targeted specific areas of the whale's body, particularly the fins, the tail, and the ribcage. By attacking the fins and tail, the Megalodon could immobilize its prey, preventing it from swimming and making it vulnerable to further attack. By targeting the ribcage, the Megalodon could inflict catastrophic damage to the whale's internal organs, including the lungs and heart, causing rapid death. This is a sophisticated hunting strategy, one that required precise targeting and considerable power. It is similar in principle to the hunting strategies used by modern great white sharks when they attack seals, but scaled up to a level that is almost beyond comprehension. The Megalodon was not just biting randomly at its prey. It was targeting specific anatomical structures, using its enormous jaws and teeth as precision instruments to disable and kill animals that were themselves among the largest creatures in the ocean. The ecological impact of the Megalodon on the Neogene marine environment was immense. As the apex predator, it sat at the very top of the food chain, exerting a controlling influence on the populations and behaviors of virtually every other large marine animal. Whales, the Megalodon's primary prey, would have been forced to evolve strategies to avoid predation. Some may have migrated to cold, polar waters where the warm-blooded but likely warm water-preferring Megalodon could not follow. Others may have evolved larger body sizes, making themselves too large and too dangerous for even the Megalodon to attack. The presence of the Megalodon in the Neogene Ocean also had cascading effects throughout the marine food web. By controlling the populations of large whales, the Megalodon indirectly influenced the populations of the organisms that whales fed upon, including fish, squid, and plankton. This phenomenon, known as a trophic cascade, is well documented in modern marine ecosystems, where the presence or absence of a top predator can have far-reaching effects on the entire ecological community. The Megalodon was a creature of warm, tropical and subtropical waters. Its fossils are found in marine deposits on every continent except Antarctica, indicating that it had a global distribution in the warm seas of the Neogene. It was most common in coastal and nearshore environments, where whale populations were densest and food was most abundant. Nursery areas, where young Megalodon sharks could grow in relative safety, have been identified in several locations around the world, based on concentrations of small Megalodon teeth in specific geological formations. The life history of the Megalodon is another area of active research. Based on comparisons with modern large sharks, researchers believe that the Megalodon was a slow-growing, late-maturing species, perhaps not reaching sexual maturity until it was 20 or even 30 years old. This slow life history strategy is typical of large marine predators and makes them particularly vulnerable to changes in their environment. When conditions are favorable, slow reproduction is not a problem, because the animal's long lifespan ensures that it will eventually produce enough offspring to maintain the population. But when conditions deteriorate, When food becomes scarce or the environment changes rapidly, slow-reproducing species cannot adapt quickly enough, and their populations can crash. And that, ultimately, is what happened to the Megalodon. The extinction of the Megalodon occurred approximately 3.5 million years ago, during the Pliocene epoch, a time of significant global cooling. The warm, productive seas that had supported the Megalodon for millions of years were changing. Ocean temperatures were dropping. Sea levels were fluctuating. The distribution and abundance of the Megalodon's prey, the great whales, were shifting in response to the changing climate. The exact cause of the Megalodon's extinction is still debated, but most researchers agree that it was the result of a combination of factors. Climate change, which reduced the availability of the warm, shallow coastal waters that the Megalodon preferred. Competition from other large predators, including the great white shark, which was diversifying and expanding its range during this period. And changes in the populations and distribution of its prey, as whales migrated to colder waters where the Megalodon could not effectively hunt. The extinction of the Megalodon marked the end of an era. For millions of years, this animal had been the ultimate expression of marine predatory power, a creature so large, so powerful, and so perfectly adapted for its role that it seemed invincible. But even the Megalodon was not immune to the forces of environmental change. No predator, no matter how formidable, is immune to those forces. And with the extinction of the Megalodon, the stage was set for the final chapter in the history of the ocean's apex predators. A chapter that is still being written. A chapter that involves a predator more devastating, more impactful, and more dangerous than any that has come before. But that is a story for another part of this documentary. For now, let us pause and reflect on what we have learned. From the razor-toothed Omnidens of the Cambrian, to the tentacled Endoceras of the Ordovician, to the armored sea scorpions of the Silurian, to the bone-plated Dunkleosteus of the Devonian, to the scissor-toothed Edestus of the Carboniferous, to the buzzsaw Helicoprion of the Permian, to the titanic Ichthyodoton of the Triassic, to the crushing Pliosaurus of the Jurassic, to the relentless Mosasaurus of the Cretaceous, to the toothy Basilosaurus of the Paleogene, to the mighty Megalodon of the Neogene, the ocean has always produced predators of extraordinary power and sophistication. Each era has brought new challenges, new ecological opportunities, and new evolutionary innovations. Each era has produced predators that were perfectly adapted for their time, creatures that sat at the top of the food chain and shaped the evolution of every other organism in their ecosystem. And each era has ended, often in catastrophe, with the great predators of one age giving way to the great predators of the next. This is the pattern of life in the ocean. This is the rhythm of the deep. Predators rise, predators fall, and new predators rise to take their place. It is a cycle that has been repeating for over 500 million years, and it shows no signs of stopping. The ocean is, and always has been, the deadliest place on Earth. The history of marine predation is not just a catalogue of terrifying animals. It is a window into the fundamental processes that drive evolution, a story of adaptation, competition, and survival that has played out across the vast canvas of geological time. Every predator we have discussed, from the humble Omnidens to the mighty Megalodon, was the product of millions of years of natural selection, each one refined and perfected by the relentless pressures of its environment. And yet, for all their power, for all their size, for all their evolutionary sophistication, every single one of these predators eventually fell. The Omnidens was replaced by the cephalopods. The cephalopods were challenged by the sea scorpions. The sea scorpions were overthrown by the armored fish. The armored fish gave way to the sharks. The sharks shared their dominion with the marine reptiles. The marine reptiles were swept away by an asteroid. The whales took their place, only to be hunted by the Megalodon. And the Megalodon itself, the greatest predatory shark that ever lived, succumbed to the slow, grinding forces of climate change and ecological transformation. Each of these transitions tells us something important about the nature of power in the natural world. Power is not permanent. Dominance is not eternal. No matter how perfectly adapted an animal may be for its current environment, the environment will eventually change, and when it does, the mighty will fall and the meek will inherit the earth, or in this case, the sea. This is a humbling lesson, one that applies not just to sharks and marine reptiles, but to all living things, including us. But we will explore that final chapter when we continue this journey. For now, the ancient seas have given us their testimony. The fossils have spoken. The teeth, the bones, the shells, the scars, they have told us their stories. Stories of pursuit and escape, of attack and defense, of life and death in the most unforgiving environment on the planet. The ocean has always been a killing ground, and the predators that have stalked its depths across the ages represent the pinnacle of evolutionary achievement, organisms so perfectly tuned to the art of killing that they dominated their worlds for millions upon millions of years. From the first tentative snapping of chitin jaws in the Cambrian shallows to the thunderous closing of a megalodon's maw around the body of a whale, the history of marine predation is a symphony of violence, played out on a stage that covers 70% of the planet's surface, in depths that remain, even today, largely unexplored and deeply mysterious. We have walked along the edge of that mystery today. We have peered into the deep past and seen the faces of the killers that once ruled these waters. And we have understood, perhaps for the first time, just how dangerous the ocean has always been. But we are not finished. There is more to tell. More predators to meet. More extinctions to witness. More evolutionary dramas to unfold. The deadliest waters still have secrets to reveal. And when we return for the second part of this documentary, we will dive deeper than ever before. We will explore the ecosystems that supported these incredible predators, the prey that sustained them, and the catastrophes that destroyed them. We will examine the science behind the reconstructions, the painstaking detective work that allows us to reconstruct the lives of animals that have been dead for hundreds of millions of years. And we will confront the final, most unsettling question of all. The question of what we, the newest predator in the ocean, are doing to the waters that have been the engine of evolution for more than 500 million years. The deep past is a mirror, and when we look into it, we see not just the monsters that came before us, but a reflection of ourselves. Until next time, the ocean waits. Dark, deep, patient, and as dangerous as it has ever been. When we left off, the Megalodon had fallen. The greatest predatory shark in the history of life, an animal that had terrorized the oceans for millions of years, had succumbed to the slow, grinding forces of a changing world. The warm seas that had sustained it were cooling. The whales it hunted were migrating to waters it could not follow. And in the end, even the most powerful jaws ever to close around living flesh were not enough to overcome the indifferent, inexorable machinery of planetary change. The throne of the ocean's apex predator was empty. But nature abhors a vacuum. And the ocean, that ancient crucible of killers, was already preparing its next chapter. A chapter more complex, more nuanced, and ultimately more devastating than anything that had come before. Let us return, then, to the deep. Let us pick up the thread of this extraordinary story where we left it, and follow it forward, through the final epochs of geological time, to the present day. Because the story of marine predation did not end with the Megalodon. In many ways, it was just beginning its most consequential phase. To understand what happened after the Megalodon's extinction, we need to understand the world it left behind. The Pliocene epoch, the period during which the Megalodon disappeared, was a time of dramatic environmental change. The planet was cooling. Ice sheets were forming at both poles, something that had not happened for tens of millions of years. Sea levels were falling as water was locked up in continental glaciers. Ocean currents were shifting, reorganizing the global circulation patterns that distribute heat and nutrients around the planet. These changes had profound effects on marine ecosystems worldwide. The warm, shallow seas that had been the nurseries and hunting grounds of the Megalodon were shrinking. Tropical and subtropical zones were contracting toward the equator. The productive coastal waters that had supported vast populations of whales, fish, and other marine life were being transformed by changing temperatures and nutrient patterns. But even as the old order was passing away, a new order was taking shape. The cooling climate, paradoxically, was creating conditions that would eventually support some of the most productive marine ecosystems in Earth's history. Cold, nutrient-rich waters upwelling from the deep ocean were fertilizing the surface waters, driving enormous blooms of phytoplankton that formed the base of incredibly rich food chains. These food chains supported vast populations of fish, which in turn supported large numbers of marine mammals and seabirds. The predators of this new world were different from the Megalodon. They were, in general, smaller, faster, more intelligent, and more socially sophisticated. Where the Megalodon had been a solitary giant, relying on sheer size and power to overwhelm its prey, the new apex predators of the post-Megalodon ocean employed a range of strategies that included cooperative hunting, complex communication, and a level of behavioral flexibility that the Megalodon, for all its physical prowess, could never have matched. The sharks, of course, did not disappear with the Megalodon. Sharks had been in the ocean for over 400 million years, and they had survived every mass extinction event in Earth's history. The extinction of the Megalodon was a setback for the largest shark lineages, but smaller, more adaptable shark species continued to thrive and diversify. The great white shark, Carcharodon carcharias, is often presented as the Megalodon's successor, the inheritor of the throne of ultimate marine predator. And while this comparison is somewhat misleading, the great white is not closely related to the Megalodon and occupies a rather different ecological niche. It is true that the great white shark emerged as one of the most formidable marine predators of the post-Megalodon world. The great white shark is a superbly designed predator. It can reach lengths of over 20 feet, though most individuals are considerably smaller. Its body is perfectly streamlined, a torpedo shape that allows it to move through the water with minimal drag. Its muscles are powerful and efficient, capable of generating explosive bursts of speed that can propel the shark to over 35 miles per hour, fast enough to launch its entire body out of the water in the spectacular breaching attacks for which the species is famous. The teeth of the great white are triangular, serrated, and razor-sharp, each one a precision-cutting instrument designed for slicing through flesh and blubber. The upper teeth are broad and triangular, optimized for cutting, while the lower teeth are narrower and more pointed, designed for gripping and holding. This combination allows the great white to seize its prey with the lower teeth while the upper teeth do the cutting, an efficient system that maximizes the damage inflicted with each bite. But perhaps the most impressive aspect of the great white shark is its sensory arsenal. This animal possesses one of the most sophisticated sensory systems of any predator on the planet. Its eyes are adapted for low-light conditions, allowing it to hunt effectively at dawn, dusk, and in murky water. Its lateral line system detects vibrations in the water, alerting it to the movements of potential prey from considerable distances. Its olfactory system is legendarily acute, capable of detecting a single drop of blood in millions of gallons of water. And then there is the electrosensory system, the ampullae of Lorenzini, a network of specialized sensory organs distributed across the shark's snout that can detect the weak electrical fields generated by the muscle contractions and nerve impulses of living animals. This sense is unique to sharks and their relatives, and it gives the great white an almost supernatural ability to detect hidden prey. Even an animal buried in sand, completely invisible and motionless, cannot hide from the great white's electrical sense. As long as its heart is beating and its muscles are functioning, it is broadcasting a signal that the shark can detect. The great white shark is, without question, one of the most effective marine predators alive today. But it is not the most effective. That distinction belongs to another animal, one that combines size, power, intelligence, and social sophistication in a package that is, pound for pound, the most formidable predatory organism currently living in the ocean. The orca, or Sinus orca, the killer whale. The name, killer whale, is actually a mistranslation. The original name, used by Spanish sailors who observed these animals hunting whales in the open ocean, was Asesino de Balenas, which translates to whale killer. Somewhere along the line, the words were reversed, and whale killer became killer whale. But both names are apt, because the orca is, without any exaggeration, the most successful apex predator in the modern ocean. Orcas are the largest members of the dolphin family, with adult males reaching lengths of over 30 feet and weights of over 10 tons. They are found in every ocean on the planet, from the warm tropics to the frozen polar seas, making them one of the most widely distributed mammals on Earth. They are social animals, living in tight-knit family groups called pods that can include up to 40 or more individuals. And they are intelligent, possessed of one of the largest and most complex brains of any animal on the planet, with cognitive abilities that rival those of the great apes. But what makes orcas truly remarkable as predators is not their size, their distribution, or even their intelligence. It is their versatility. Orcas are, quite possibly, the most versatile predators in the history of the ocean. They hunt fish, squid, seabirds, sea turtles, seals, sea lions, walruses, dolphins, porpoises, and whales. They hunt great white sharks, flipping them upside down to induce a state of paralysis called tonic immobility, and then extracting the shark's liver with surgical precision. They hunt blue whales, the largest animals on the planet, working in coordinated teams to separate calves from their mothers and then drowning them by holding them underwater. The hunting strategies of orcas are as diverse as their prey. Different populations of orcas, living in different parts of the world, have developed distinct hunting techniques that are passed down from generation to generation through cultural transmission. In other words, orcas teach their young how to hunt, and different groups of orcas have different traditions, different techniques, different specializations. Some orca populations specialize in hunting salmon, using echolocation to track individual fish through murky water and then picking them off with precision strikes. Others specialize in hunting seals, deliberately beaching themselves on shorelines to snatch seals from the water's edge, a behavior so dangerous that young orcas practice it under the supervision of experienced adults for years before attempting it independently. Still others specialize in hunting whales, using coordinated pack tactics that can take hours or even days to bring down a single large prey animal. This level of behavioral sophistication is unprecedented among marine predators. No shark, no mosasaur, no pliosaur, no megalodon ever demonstrated anything approaching the strategic complexity and cultural richness of orca predation. The orca represents a fundamentally new kind of apex predator, one that relies not just on physical attributes like size, speed, and bite force, but on intelligence, cooperation, and the ability to learn and innovate. And yet, for all its prowess, the orca is not the most impactful predator in the modern ocean. That distinction belongs to a species that most people would not immediately think of as a marine predator at all. But before we reach that final chapter, let us take a step back and examine some of the broader patterns and themes that have emerged from our journey through 500 million years of marine predation. Because this story is not just about individual animals, no matter how spectacular they may be. It is about the processes that created those animals, the ecological dynamics that sustained them, and the catastrophes that destroyed them. It is about the deep, underlying logic of predation itself, the evolutionary arms race that has driven the development of every jaw, every tooth, every claw, and every hunting strategy we have discussed. The first and perhaps most fundamental pattern is the escalation of size. Across the entire history of marine predation, there has been a general trend toward larger and larger apex predators. The Cambrian predators were measured in feet. The Ordovician predators could reach tens of feet. The Devonian placoderms exceeded 20 feet. The Mesozoic marine reptiles reached 40, 50, even 80 feet. And the Megalodon, the culmination of 400 million years of shark evolution, could exceed 50 feet and weigh 75 tons. This trend toward gigantism is not accidental. It is driven by the fundamental physics and ecology of marine predation. In the ocean, size confers enormous advantages. A larger predator can take larger prey, giving it access to more energy per kill. A larger body is more efficient at swimming over long distances, thanks to the physics of drag and the relationship between body surface area and volume. A larger animal has fewer predators of its own, reducing the energy it needs to spend on vigilance and defense. And a larger body provides more thermal mass, helping the animal maintain a stable body temperature in cold water. All of these factors create a powerful selective pressure for increased body size among apex predators. Over millions of years, this pressure has driven a ratcheting up of predator size, with each successive generation of apex predators tending to be larger than the one before. This is not an ironclad rule, there are plenty of exceptions and reversals, but as a general trend, it is one of the most consistent patterns in the history of marine predation. The second major pattern is the coevolution of predator and prey. Every predator we have discussed evolved in the context of an arms race with its prey. The Omnidens evolved tooth plates to cut through the armor of trilobites. Dunkleosteus evolved self-sharpening bone plates to crush the shells of other armored fish. The Megalodon evolved massive serrated teeth to slice through the blubber and bone of giant whales. In each case, the evolution of the predator's weapons was driven by the evolution of the prey's defenses, and vice versa. This coevolutionary dynamic is one of the primary engines of evolutionary change in marine ecosystems. It is the reason why marine life has become increasingly sophisticated over the course of geological time. The predators of the Cambrian were simple animals with simple weapons, preying on simple prey. The predators of the Neogene were complex animals with complex weapons, preying on complex prey. This progressive increase in sophistication was driven, in large part, by the relentless pressure of the predator-prey arms race. The third pattern is the recurring cycle of extinction and replacement. Again and again throughout the history of marine predation, the dominant predators of one era have been swept away by mass extinction events, only to be replaced by entirely new groups of predators in the following era. The radiodonts of the Cambrian were replaced by the cephalopods of the Ordovician. The sea scorpions of the Silurian were replaced by the armored fish of the Devonian. The placoderms were replaced by the sharks. The sharks shared their dominion with the marine reptiles. The marine reptiles were replaced by the marine mammals. And so on. This cycle of extinction and replacement is one of the defining features of the history of life on Earth. It tells us that no dynasty of predators, no matter how successful, is permanent. Every predator lineage has a beginning and an end. The forces of environmental change, whether gradual or catastrophic, will eventually bring even the most dominant predators to their knees. But the cycle also tells us something more hopeful. It tells us that life is resilient. After every extinction, no matter how devastating, life has recovered. New predators have always risen to fill the vacancies left by the fallen. The ocean has never remained empty for long. The killing grounds have always been restocked. This resilience is built into the very structure of marine ecosystems. The ocean is so vast, so deep, and so productive that it has an almost limitless capacity to support life. Even after the worst extinction events, when 90% or more of all marine species were wiped out, the survivors were able to diversify and rebuild complex, multi-layered ecosystems within a few million years. This capacity for recovery is one of the most remarkable and encouraging features of life on our planet. Now, let us turn our attention to some of the predators and ecological dynamics that we have not yet discussed in detail. Because the story of marine predation is far richer and more complex than a simple list of apex predators. For every apex predator, there was an entire ecosystem of smaller predators, mesopredators, and prey species, all interacting in complex and often surprising ways. Understanding these interactions is essential for understanding the full picture of marine predation through the ages. Let us begin with the cephalopods, a group that we discussed briefly in the context of the Ordovician, but that deserves much more attention. Because the cephalopods are one of the most extraordinary success stories in the history of marine predation, a group that has maintained its position as a significant predatory force for over 480 million years. The cephalopods of the Ordovician, as we discussed, were giants. The great nautiloids, led by Endoceras, were the apex predators of their time. But the nautiloids were just the beginning of the cephalopod story. Over the course of the Paleozoic, the cephalopods diversified into an astonishing array of forms, many of which were formidable predators in their own right. The ammonites, which first appeared in the Devonian period, became one of the most successful and diverse groups of marine animals in Earth's history. These coiled shell cephalopods were related to the nautiloids but differed in several important respects, including their more complex shell structures and their generally smaller size. While most ammonites were probably not apex predators, some species grew to considerable sizes, with shells over 6 feet in diameter, and were likely significant predators of fish and smaller cephalopods. The ammonites survived every mass extinction from the Devonian through the Cretaceous, diversifying after each crisis to fill the ecological spaces left by the victims. They were one of the most resilient and adaptable groups of marine animals ever to exist. Their shells, preserved in extraordinary abundance in marine sediments around the world, are among the most useful tools available to geologists for dating and correlating rock formations. But the ammonites were not the only cephalopod predators to emerge during the Paleozoic and Mesozoic. The belemnites, squid-like cephalopods with internal shells, appeared during the Triassic and became abundant and diverse during the Jurassic and Cretaceous. Belemnites were active, fast-swimming predators that hunted fish and other small marine animals. Their fossilized internal shells, called guards, are among the most common fossils in Mesozoic marine deposits. And then there were the ancestors of the modern squid and octopus, the coleods, which appeared during the Paleozoic and gradually replaced the shelled cephalopods as the dominant cephalopod predators. The coleods achieved their dominance by evolving a fundamentally different body plan from their shelled ancestors. Instead of carrying a heavy external shell, the coleods internalized their shell, reducing it to a thin, flexible internal structure, or in the case of the octopuses, eliminating it entirely. This freed them from the burden of carrying a heavy shell, allowing them to become faster, more agile, and more maneuverable than their shelled relatives. The evolutionary success of the coleods was spectacular. By the late Cretaceous, they had diversified into a wide range of forms, including the ancestors of modern squid, cuttlefish, and octopuses. Today, the coleoid cephalopods are among the most successful groups of marine predators on the planet, with over 800 described species occupying every marine habitat from shallow tidal pools to the abyssal depths. The modern giant squid, Architeuthis dux, is perhaps the most famous of the coleoid predators. This deep-sea giant can reach lengths of over 40 feet, including its long tentacles, making it one of the largest invertebrates alive today. The giant squid is a formidable predator, hunting fish and other squid in the deep ocean, using its enormous eyes, the largest of any living animal, to spot prey in the near-total darkness of the deep sea. But even the giant squid is dwarfed by its relative, the colossal squid, Mesonicoteuthis hamiltoni, which may reach even greater sizes and which is armed with rotating hooks on its tentacles, weapons that are unique among living cephalopods. The colossal squid is one of the most elusive animals on the planet, known primarily from specimens found in the stomachs of sperm whales and from a handful of individuals captured or observed at the surface. The relationship between giant squid and sperm whales is one of the most dramatic predator-prey interactions in the modern ocean. Sperm whales, the largest of the toothed whales, dive to extraordinary depths, sometimes exceeding 3,000 feet, to hunt giant and colossal squid in the darkness of the deep ocean. The battles between these two titans of the deep are the stuff of legend, and the scars left on the skin of sperm whales by the suckers and hooks of giant squid are tangible evidence of the violence of these encounters. This ongoing battle between cephalopod and cetacean is a modern echo of the ancient predator-prey arms races that have driven the evolution of marine life for hundreds of millions of years. The sperm whale, with its enormous head, its powerful echolocation system, and its deep diving capabilities, is the product of millions of years of coevolution with its cephalopod prey. And the giant squid, with its enormous eyes, its powerful jet propulsion, and its formidable tentacles, is equally the product of millions of years of coevolution with its cetacean predator. But the cephalopods are just one thread in the rich tapestry of marine predation. Let us now turn our attention to another group of predators that has played a crucial role in the ocean's history, one that we have mentioned only in passing but that deserves more detailed examination. The marine crocodilians. Today, crocodilians are primarily freshwater animals, inhabiting rivers, lakes, and swamps in tropical and subtropical regions around the world. The saltwater crocodile, Crocodylus porosus, is the largest living reptile, capable of reaching lengths of over 20 feet, and it is known to venture into coastal marine waters, sometimes swimming considerable distances across open ocean. But the modern saltwater crocodile is a pale shadow of the marine crocodilians that once roamed the world's oceans. During the Mesozoic era, several lineages of crocodilians independently evolved marine lifestyles, developing adaptations for swimming and hunting in the open sea. Some of the most remarkable of these were the Thalattosuchians, a group of marine crocodilians that first appeared during the early Jurassic and persisted until the early Cretaceous. The Thalattosuchians included two major subgroups. The teleosaurids were long-snout, gavial-like animals that probably hunted fish in shallow coastal waters, similar to the way modern gharials hunt in Indian rivers. But the metriorhynchids were something else entirely. These were fully marine crocodilians, animals that had abandoned the land entirely and committed to a life in the open ocean. The metriorhynchids had evolved a suite of adaptations that made them superbly adapted for marine life. Their limbs had been modified into paddle-like flippers. Their tails had developed a fish-like fin, providing powerful propulsion through the water. Their body armor, the heavy, bony scuts that characterized most crocodilians, had been reduced or eliminated, streamlining their bodies for efficient swimming. And their salt glands, specialized organs that allowed them to excrete excess salt from their blood, had been modified to handle the high salt concentrations of seawater. Some metriorhynchids, particularly the genus Dacosaurus, were formidable predators. Dacosaurus had a short, deep skull armed with large, serrated teeth that bore a striking resemblance to the teeth of theropod dinosaurs. This unusual dentition has led some researchers to describe Dacosaurus as a T-Rex of the sea, a comparison that, while somewhat hyperbolic, captures the essence of this animal's predatory capabilities. Dacosaurus was almost certainly an apex predator in its ecosystem, capable of taking on large fish, cephalopods, and possibly other marine reptiles. The existence of marine crocodilians during the Mesozoic adds another layer of complexity to our understanding of predation in ancient seas. The Jurassic and Cretaceous oceans were not dominated by a single group of predators. They were shared among multiple groups, including ichthyosaurs, plesiosaurs, pliosaurs, mosasaurs, sharks, and marine crocodilians. This diversity of predatory lineages is itself significant, because it tells us that the ancient marine food webs were complex, multi-layered structures, with different predators occupying different ecological niches and different levels of the food chain. The interplay between these different predatory groups was undoubtedly complex and dynamic. Competition for prey, avoidance of larger predators, and the partitioning of ecological niches would have created a web of interactions as intricate and nuanced as anything we see in modern marine ecosystems. Understanding these interactions is one of the great challenges of paleontology, because the fossil record, while rich in information about the anatomy and distribution of ancient animals, tells us relatively little about the details of their behavior and ecology. Now let us consider another crucial aspect of the story of marine predation, one that we have touched on repeatedly but never examined in depth. The mass extinction events. We have discussed 5 major mass extinctions during our journey through geological time. The late Ordovician extinction, the late Devonian extinction, the Permian Triassic extinction, the Great Dying, the End Triassic extinction, and the End Cretaceous extinction. Each of these events profoundly altered the course of marine predation, wiping out dominant predator lineages and creating opportunities for new groups to rise to prominence. But what caused these extinctions? And what can they tell us about the vulnerability of marine ecosystems to catastrophic change? The causes of mass extinctions are varied and complex, and in many cases, they are still debated. But several common themes emerge. Volcanic activity has been implicated in several of the major extinctions. The Permian Triassic extinction, the worst of them all, has been linked to the eruption of the Siberian Traps, a massive volcanic province that poured enormous quantities of lava, carbon dioxide, and sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere over a period of several 100,000 years. The carbon dioxide caused severe global warming, while the sulfur dioxide caused acid rain that devastated both terrestrial and marine ecosystems. The warming of the oceans reduced the solubility of oxygen in seawater, creating vast dead zones where marine life could not survive. The End Triassic extinction has been linked to the eruption of the Central Atlantic Magmatic Province, another massive volcanic event that coincided with the breakup of the supercontinent Pangaea. Like the Siberian Traps, these eruptions released enormous quantities of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, causing rapid warming and ocean acidification. The end Cretaceous extinction, as we discussed, was caused by the impact of a large asteroid, combined with the eruption of the Deccan Traps in what is now India. The asteroid impact was the primary killer, but the volcanic eruptions may have stressed ecosystems in the lead up to the impact, making them more vulnerable to the catastrophic disruption that followed. The late Ordovician extinction was caused primarily by a brief but intense ice age that locked up vast quantities of water in continental glaciers, causing sea levels to drop dramatically and destroying the shallow marine habitats that were home to the majority of marine species. The subsequent melting of the glaciers caused sea levels to rise again, but the rapid environmental fluctuations were too much for many species to survive. The late Devonian extinction is perhaps the most enigmatic of the major extinction events. Its causes are still debated, with hypotheses ranging from asteroid impacts to volcanic activity to the spread of land plants, which may have changed the chemistry of river water flowing into the oceans, causing algal blooms and anoxia. What all of these extinction events have in common is that they involved rapid, large-scale changes to the global environment. Changes in temperature, changes in ocean chemistry, changes in sea level, changes in atmospheric composition. The marine organisms that survived these events were, in general, those that were most tolerant of environmental variability, most geographically widespread, and most generalized in their ecological requirements. The organisms that went extinct were, in general, those that were most specialized, most geographically restricted, and most dependent on stable environmental conditions. This pattern has important implications for our understanding of modern marine ecosystems, which are currently undergoing environmental changes that are, in some respects, comparable in speed and magnitude to those that triggered past mass extinctions. Rising ocean temperatures, ocean acidification, deoxygenation, and habitat destruction are all stressing marine ecosystems in ways that are eerily reminiscent of the conditions that preceded past extinction events. But we will return to this theme shortly. For now, let us continue our exploration of the predators that have shaped the history of the ocean. We have focused primarily on the largest and most spectacular apex predators, the Megalodon, the mosasaurs, the pliosaurs, and their ilk. But the history of marine predation is not just a story of giants. It is also a story of smaller, less conspicuous predators that played equally important roles in marine ecosystems throughout the ages. Consider, for example, the mantis shrimp, a group of small but extraordinarily dangerous marine predators that have been prowling the seafloors of the world for over 400 million years. Modern mantis shrimp are among the most formidable predators for their size in the entire animal kingdom. They come in two basic types. The smashers possess club-like appendages that they use to deliver strikes with the force of a bullet, shattering the shells of crabs, snails, and other hard-shelled prey with a single blow. The spears have barbed appendages that they use to impale fish and other soft-bodied prey with lightning speed. The strike of a mantis shrimp is one of the fastest movements in the animal kingdom, accelerating at over 10,000 times the force of gravity, and creating cavitation bubbles in the water that produce a secondary shockwave capable of stunning or killing prey even if the initial strike misses. The entire strike takes less than 3 milliseconds, faster than the human eye can follow, faster than many high-speed cameras can capture. Mantis shrimp have been around since at least the Carboniferous period, and they have been refining their remarkable predatory abilities for hundreds of millions of years. They are a vivid reminder that size is not everything in the world of marine predation. A mantis shrimp may be only a few inches long, but within its ecological niche, it is every bit as dominant and effective as a megalodon was in its own niche. Another often overlooked group of marine predators are the cone snails, a family of predatory sea snails that have evolved one of the most sophisticated chemical weapon systems in the animal kingdom. Cone snails hunt by firing a hollow, harpoon-like tooth into their prey and injecting a complex cocktail of venoms, called conotoxins, that can paralyze and kill fish, worms, and other snails within seconds. The conotoxins produced by cone snails are extraordinarily potent and diverse. Each species of cone snail produces its own unique cocktail of toxins, and many of these toxins target specific ion channels in the nervous system, blocking nerve signals with precision and efficiency. Some cone snail venoms are so potent that they can kill a human being, and several species are considered among the most dangerous animals in the ocean. The cone snails have been evolving their venomous hunting strategy for at least 50 million years, and the diversity of their toxins is a testament to the power of the coevolutionary arms race between predator and prey. Each species of cone snail has evolved toxins that are specifically tailored to the defenses of its preferred prey, creating a chemical arsenal of extraordinary specificity and potency. These examples, the mantis shrimp and the cone snails, illustrate an important point about marine predation. The ocean is not just a world of big predators eating big prey. It is a world of predation at every scale, from the microscopic to the titanic. At every level of the marine food web, predators are hunting prey are evolving defenses, and predators are evolving countermeasures. This multi-scale arms race has been the primary driver of evolutionary innovation in the ocean for over 500 million years. Let us now return to the deep past one more time and examine a group of predators that we have not yet discussed, but that played a crucial role in the history of marine predation during the Mesozoic era. The fish. We have discussed the placoderms of the Devonian and the sharks that have been present in the ocean for over 400 million years. But the bony fish, the teleosts, which today make up the vast majority of all fish species, also produced some remarkable predators during the Mesozoic and Cenozoic eras. The Cretaceous seas, in addition to being home to mosasaurs and plesiosaurs, were also home to some truly enormous bony fish. Xiphactinus, sometimes called the bulldog fish, was a massive predatory fish that could reach lengths of over 20 feet. It was a fast, powerful swimmer with a large mouth full of sharp teeth, and it was one of the most formidable fish predators in the western interior seaway. Fossil specimens of Xiphactinus have been found with the complete, undigested remains of other large fish inside their body cavities, providing dramatic evidence of this animal's voracious appetite. Another remarkable Cretaceous fish was Endoceras, sometimes called the saber-toothed herring, a medium-sized fish armed with large, fawn-like teeth that it used to impale its prey. Endoceras was not a true herring, but its common name gives a sense of its appearance. These fish were incredibly abundant in Cretaceous seas and were an important food source for larger predators, including mosasaurs and sharks. The diversity of fish predators in the Cretaceous and subsequent periods highlights an important aspect of marine food webs. The apex predators that we have focused on, the mosasaurs, the pliosaurs, the Megalodon, were dependent on a complex hierarchy of smaller predators and prey species. The Megalodon could not have existed without the whales it hunted. The whales could not have existed without the fish and krill they consumed. The fish could not have existed without the plankton they fed upon. And the plankton could not have existed without the nutrients and sunlight that fueled their growth. This interconnectedness is a fundamental feature of marine ecosystems. Every predator, no matter how powerful, is ultimately dependent on the health and productivity of the entire food web. When the base of the food web is disrupted, whether by climate change, pollution, or other factors, the effects cascade upward through the trophic levels, affecting predators at every scale. This principle of interconnectedness is not just an abstract ecological concept. It has very real, very concrete implications for the modern ocean. Because the food webs that support today's marine predators are under unprecedented stress from a variety of human activities. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. Let us first complete our survey of the predators that have shaped the history of the ocean before we turn to the present day. We have traced the history of marine predation from the Cambrian to the Neogene, from the Omnidens to the Megalodon. We have seen how each era produced its own unique cast of apex predators, each one adapted to the specific conditions of its time. And we have seen how mass extinction events periodically reset the evolutionary clock, sweeping away the dominant predators and creating opportunities for new groups to rise. But there is one more era to consider. One more period of geological time that we must examine. The Quaternary, the period in which we currently live. The Quaternary period began approximately 2.5 million years ago, with the onset of the Pleistocene epoch, the Great Ice Age. The Pleistocene was a time of dramatic climate fluctuations, with vast continental glaciers advancing and retreating in cycles driven by subtle variations in Earth's orbit and axial tilt. Sea levels rose and fell by hundreds of feet as water was alternately locked up in glaciers and released back into the ocean. Marine ecosystems were subjected to constant stress as habitats expanded and contracted with the changing climate. The Pleistocene was also the time when a new kind of predator emerged, a predator unlike anything the ocean had ever seen. Not a fish. Not a reptile. Not a mammal. Something else entirely. A primate. A land-dwelling, air-breathing primate that walked on two legs and used its hands to make tools. Homo sapiens. Humans. The story of human interaction with the ocean is long and complex, stretching back tens of thousands of years to the earliest coastal settlements. For most of this history, humans were relatively minor participants in the marine ecosystem. Coastal peoples hunted fish and shellfish for food, using simple tools like hooks, spears, and nets. Their impact on marine populations was, in most cases, localized and sustainable. But as human populations grew, as technology advanced, and as economic systems became more complex, the scale of human impact on the ocean increased dramatically. The development of sailing ships allowed humans to range far from shore, accessing deep-water fish stocks that had previously been beyond their reach. The invention of mechanized fishing gear, including trawl nets, long lines, and purse seines, allowed humans to harvest fish in quantities that would have been unimaginable to earlier generations. Today, humans are, by any measure, the most impactful predators in the marine environment. We harvest over 80 million metric tons of fish and other marine organisms from the ocean every year. We have driven numerous marine species to the brink of extinction, including many of the great whales, several species of sea turtles, and countless species of fish. We have fundamentally altered the structure and function of marine food webs worldwide, reducing the abundance of large predators and allowing smaller prey species to proliferate unchecked. The impact of human predation on the ocean is not limited to the direct removal of marine organisms through fishing. We have also fundamentally altered the marine environment itself, in ways that affect every level of the food web. We have raised ocean temperatures by burning fossil fuels and releasing greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. We have acidified the ocean by increasing the concentration of carbon dioxide in seawater. We have created vast dead zones by allowing agricultural fertilizers to flow into coastal waters, triggering algal blooms that consume all the available oxygen and suffocate marine life. We have introduced persistent pollutants, including plastics, heavy metals, and synthetic chemicals, into the marine environment, contaminating food webs from the deepest ocean trenches to the most remote polar seas. The cumulative effect of these impacts is difficult to overstate. The modern ocean is undergoing changes that are, in many respects, as profound and far-reaching as those that triggered the great mass extinctions of the past. Ocean temperatures are rising at a rate that has no precedent in the geological record of the past 50 million years. Ocean acidification is occurring faster than at any time in at least the past 300 million years. Species are going extinct at a rate that is estimated to be 100 to 1,000 times higher than the natural background rate. These changes are having cascading effects throughout marine food webs. Coral reefs, which support approximately 25% of all marine species, are bleaching and dying at an alarming rate as ocean temperatures rise. Phytoplankton populations, the foundation of the marine food web, are declining in many parts of the ocean as surface waters warm and stratify, reducing the supply of nutrients from the deep. Fish populations are shifting toward the poles as tropical waters become too warm, disrupting the ecological relationships that have sustained marine communities for thousands of years. The great predators of the modern ocean are among the most affected by these changes. Shark populations worldwide have declined by an estimated 70% over the past 50 years, driven by overfishing, habitat loss, and the demand for shark fins. Many species of tuna, billfish, and other large predatory fish have experienced similar declines. Even the orca, the most intelligent and adaptable marine predator, is facing mounting threats from pollution, prey depletion, and habitat disturbance. The story of human impact on the ocean is, in many ways, a continuation of the story of marine predation that we have been telling throughout this documentary. We are the latest in a long line of apex predators that have shaped the marine environment. But unlike the Megalodon, unlike the mosasaurs, unlike the pliosaurs and the Dunkleosteus and the Omnidens, we are the first marine predator that has the capacity to understand the consequences of our actions. We are the first predator that can look at the fossil record, read the story of past extinctions, and recognize the warning signs in our own time. Whether we will heed those warnings is an open question. The history of life on Earth suggests that no dynasty of predators lasts forever. The forces of environmental change are implacable, and they have brought down every predator lineage that has ever existed. But we are different from every predator that has come before us. We are different because we can choose. We can choose to continue on our current path, exploiting the ocean's resources at unsustainable rates and altering the marine environment in ways that may trigger another mass extinction. Or we can choose a different path, one that recognizes the ocean's limits and seeks to live within them. The choice is ours. It has always been ours. And the consequences of that choice will echo through the geological record for millions of years to come, just as the consequences of every predatory dynasty that preceded us have echoed through the rock and the bone and the tooth and the shell. Let us now step back from the present and consider the broader implications of everything we have learned. Because the story of marine predation is not just a story about animals and ecosystems. It is a story about the fundamental nature of life itself. Life, at its core, is a competition for energy. Every living organism, from the smallest bacterium to the largest whale, needs energy to survive, grow, and reproduce. The ultimate source of almost all energy in the biosphere is the sun, which powers the photosynthetic organisms, the plants and algae and cyanobacteria, that form the base of every food web on the planet. But from that basic foundation of solar energy, life has built an extraordinary edifice of complexity, with energy flowing from producers to herbivores to predators to apex predators, with each level of the food web supporting fewer individuals but of larger size and greater power. Predation is the mechanism by which energy flows upward through the food web. When a shark eats a fish, it is capturing the energy that the fish obtained from its food, which in turn obtained its energy from smaller organisms, which in turn obtained their energy from the sun. The predator is, in a very real sense, a concentrated packet of solar energy, a biological machine that has been assembled and refined by millions of years of evolution to capture and process energy with maximum efficiency. This perspective helps us understand why predators have been such a consistent and prominent feature of marine ecosystems throughout Earth's history. As long as there has been energy flowing through marine food webs, there have been predators to intercept that energy. The specific form of those predators has changed dramatically over time, from arthropods to cephalopods to fish to reptiles to mammals, but the fundamental ecological role has remained the same. There has always been something at the top of the food chain, something that hunts and kills and consumes other living things for energy. This is not cruelty. It is not evil. It is simply the way energy flows through living systems. Predation is as natural and as necessary as photosynthesis. Without predators, herbivore populations would explode, consuming all available plant life and ultimately collapsing in a catastrophic bust. Without predators, marine ecosystems would lose the top-down regulation that keeps them in balance. Without predators, the ocean would be a fundamentally different and much less diverse place. This understanding of predation as a fundamental ecological process, rather than simply a source of dramatic and terrifying animals, is essential for appreciating the full significance of the story we have been telling. The predators of the past were not just impressive animals. They were essential components of the ecosystems they inhabited, playing roles that were crucial for the health and stability of the entire marine environment. And the predators of the present are equally essential. The great white sharks, the orcas, the tuna, the barracudas, the groupers, the octopuses, and all the other predators that patrol the modern ocean are not just impressive animals that we admire or fear. They are keystones of their ecosystems, organisms whose presence or absence determines the structure and function of the entire marine community. When we remove these predators, whether through overfishing, habitat destruction, or other human activities, we do not just lose individual species. We lose the ecological roles those species play, and the cascading effects of their loss can ripple through the entire food web, producing changes that are difficult to predict and often irreversible. The concept of the trophic cascade, which we mentioned earlier, provides a powerful illustration of this principle. In a trophic cascade, the removal or addition of a top predator causes changes that cascade downward through the food web, affecting organisms at every trophic level. The classic example is the relationship between sea otters, sea urchins, and kelp forests in the North Pacific. When sea otters are present, they prey on sea urchins, keeping urchin populations in check and allowing kelp forests to flourish. When sea otters are removed, urchin populations explode, and they overgraze the kelp, transforming lush kelp forests into barren, urchin barrens, that support far less biodiversity. Similar trophic cascades have been documented in marine ecosystems around the world. The decline of large sharks in the western North Atlantic has been linked to increases in populations of smaller predators like Kaunos rays, which in turn have devastated populations of bay scallops and other commercially important shellfish. The decline of cod in the North Atlantic has been linked to increases in populations of smaller fish and crustaceans, fundamentally altering the structure of the marine food web. These examples illustrate a fundamental truth about marine ecosystems. Everything is connected. The apex predators, the mesopredators, the herbivores, the primary producers, they are all linked in a complex web of interactions that has been shaped by hundreds of millions of years of coevolution. Remove any one of these components, and the entire web can unravel in unexpected and often damaging ways. This brings us back to the central theme of our documentary. The ocean has always been a killing ground. It has always been home to predators of extraordinary power and sophistication. And those predators have always played a crucial role in maintaining the health and balance of marine ecosystems. From the Cambrian to the present, the story of marine predation has been a story of innovation, competition, and adaptation. Each era has produced its own unique cast of predators, each one perfectly adapted to the specific conditions of its time. And each era has seen those predators play a vital role in shaping the evolution and ecology of the entire marine community. The Omnidens of the Cambrian drove the evolution of defensive armor and trilobites. The Endoceras of the Ordovician shaped the behavior of every animal in the ancient seas. The sea scorpions of the Silurian pushed fish to evolve jaws. Dunkleosteus of the Devonian forced its contemporaries to develop speed and agility. The bizarre sharks of the Carboniferous and Permian explored the boundaries of what was possible in dental engineering. The marine reptiles of the Mesozoic dominated the oceans for nearly 200 million years, driving the evolution of fish, cephalopods, and each other. The whales of the Cenozoic took up the mantle of marine mammal dominance, evolving into the largest and most intelligent marine animals on the planet. And the Megalodon, the ultimate expression of shark predatory power, shaped the behavior and distribution of great whales for millions of years. Each of these predators was a masterpiece of evolution, a biological machine refined over millions of years to be the best possible version of itself. And each of them, without exception, eventually fell, replaced by new predators that were better adapted to the changing conditions of their world. This is the lesson of the deep past. The lesson written in rock and bone and tooth and shell, in the fossil graveyards of ancient seas and the living communities of the modern ocean. No predator lasts forever. No dynasty endures for eternity. The ocean is a stage, and the actors change with every act. But the play goes on. The question that confronts us now, the question that hangs over the modern ocean like a shadow, is whether the current act of the play will end the way the previous acts have ended, with a mass extinction that sweeps away the dominant predators and resets the evolutionary clock, or whether it will end differently. Whether we, the most impactful predators the ocean has ever known, will choose to write a different ending. The fossil record tells us what happens when the ocean's apex predators disappear. It has happened before. It will happen again. The ocean will recover. Life will find a way. New predators will rise. But the recovery takes millions of years. Millions of years of impoverished ecosystems, reduced biodiversity, and disrupted food webs. millions of years during which the ocean is a diminished version of its former self. We do not have millions of years. We have decades. Perhaps less. The changes we are making to the ocean are happening on a timescale that is orders of magnitude faster than any natural environmental change in the geological record. The organisms that live in the ocean today, including the predators that sit at the top of the food chain, evolved in a world that changed slowly, over thousands and millions of years. They are not equipped to deal with changes that happen over decades. This is the crux of the matter. This is the lesson that the history of marine predation teaches us, if we are willing to learn it. The ocean is resilient, but it is not indestructible. Its ecosystems are complex and interconnected, and they depend on the presence of predators at every level of the food web. When those predators are removed, the consequences can be swift, severe, and long-lasting. Let us consider one more aspect of this story before we bring our journey to a close. Let us consider the science itself, the remarkable detective work that allows us to reconstruct the lives of animals that have been dead for hundreds of millions of years. Paleontology, the study of ancient life through fossils, is one of the most challenging and rewarding scientific disciplines. Paleontologists work with incomplete evidence, fragmentary clues preserved in rock that must be painstakingly excavated, prepared, analyzed, and interpreted. A single fossil tooth can tell a trained paleontologist an enormous amount about the animal that bore it, its size, its diet, its ecological role, its evolutionary relationships, and even aspects of its behavior and physiology. The tools available to modern paleontologists are far more powerful than those of previous generations. CT scanning allows researchers to examine the internal structure of fossils without cutting them open, revealing details of bone microstructure, tooth replacement patterns, and even the outlines of soft tissues that have been preserved as mineral traces. Stable isotope analysis can reveal information about an ancient animal's diet, habitat, and even its body temperature. Biomechanical modeling, using sophisticated computer programs, allows researchers to reconstruct the movements and feeding behaviors of extinct animals with a degree of precision that would have been unimaginable a few decades ago. These tools have revolutionized our understanding of marine predation in the deep past. The bite force calculations for Dunkleosteus and Pliosaurus, the feeding mechanics of the Helicoprion tooth whorl, the swimming speeds of ichthyosaurs and mosasaurs, all of these insights have been made possible by the application of modern technology to ancient fossils. But perhaps the most important tool available to the paleontologist is the comparative method, the practice of using living animals as models for understanding extinct ones. By studying the anatomy, physiology, and behavior of modern marine predators, scientists can develop hypotheses about how extinct predators may have looked, moved, hunted, and interacted with their environments. The comparison between modern dolphins and Mesozoic ichthyosaurs, for example, has provided invaluable insights into the swimming speeds, diving capabilities, and social behaviors of these ancient marine reptiles. The comparative method has its limitations, of course. Extinct animals were not always directly comparable to any living species, and there is always a risk of projecting modern characteristics onto ancient organisms that may have been fundamentally different. But used carefully and critically, the comparative method is an extraordinarily powerful tool for bringing the ancient past to life. And it is through this combination of fossil evidence, modern technology, and comparative analysis that we have been able to reconstruct the extraordinary story of marine predation that we have told in this documentary. A story that spans over 500 million years, that encompasses dozens of predatory lineages, and that reveals the deep, underlying patterns that have shaped the evolution of life in the ocean. As we bring this journey to a close, let us take one final look at the ocean. Not the ocean of the past, but the ocean of the present. The ocean that we see when we stand on a beach and gaze out at the horizon. The ocean that covers 70% of our planet's surface and contains 97% of its water. The ocean that produces more than half of the oxygen we breathe. The ocean that absorbs a quarter of the carbon dioxide we release into the atmosphere. The ocean that feeds billions of people. The ocean that is, in every sense, the foundation of life on Earth. This ocean is in trouble. Its temperatures are rising. Its chemistry is changing. Its ecosystems are being disrupted. Its predators are being removed. And the consequences of these changes, if they continue unchecked, could be as devastating as any mass extinction in the geological record. But the ocean is also resilient. It has survived 5 mass extinctions. It has recovered from catastrophes that killed 90% of its inhabitants. It has rebuilt complex, diverse ecosystems from the ashes of devastation, again and again, over hundreds of millions of years. The question is not whether the ocean will survive. It will. Life will find a way. The question is what the ocean will look like when it recovers, and how long the recovery will take. Will it take a few centuries? A few millennia? A few million years? The answer depends, in large part, on what we do in the next few decades. The predators of the past have given us a gift. They have given us a record, written in stone, of what happens when the balance of the ocean is disrupted. They have shown us that ecosystems can collapse, that predator lineages can be extinguished, and that the consequences of these losses can reverberate through the food web for millions of years. They have also shown us that recovery is possible, that new predators will always rise to fill the vacancies left by the fallen, and that the ocean has an almost limitless capacity for renewal. But recovery takes time. Geological time. Time measured in millions of years. And we, as a species, do not think in geological time. We think in terms of years, decades, at most centuries. Our economic systems, our political systems, our social systems, all operate on timescales that are infinitesimally short by geological standards. This mismatch between the timescales of human activity and the timescales of ecological recovery is perhaps the greatest challenge we face in our relationship with the ocean. The predators of the deep past cannot speak to us directly. But their fossils speak volumes. Every tooth, every bone, every trace fossil tells a story. A story of a world that was, in many ways, very different from our own, but that was governed by the same fundamental ecological principles. A story of predation, competition, and adaptation. A story of life and death in the most demanding environment on the planet. We have listened to those stories today. We have followed the thread of marine predation from the dawn of complex life to the present day, tracing the rise and fall of predatory dynasties that spanned hundreds of millions of years. We have met animals of extraordinary power and beauty, creatures that were perfectly adapted for their roles in the ecosystems they inhabited. And we have seen how the loss of these predators, whether through mass extinction or human activity, can have profound and far-reaching consequences for the entire marine environment. The ocean has always been the deadliest place on Earth. It has always been home to predators that defy imagination. From the tooth plates of the Omnidens to the bone-crushing jaws of Dunkleosteus, from the buzzsaw teeth of Helicoprion to the trihedral fangs of Pliosaurus, from the double-rowed teeth of Mosasaurus to the serrated blades of the Megalodon, the ocean has produced a succession of killing machines that is without parallel in the history of life. These predators were not just instruments of death. They were architects of evolution. Their presence in the ocean drove the development of every defensive adaptation, every escape strategy, every camouflage pattern, and every behavioral innovation that has ever appeared in marine life. Without them, the ocean would be a simpler, less diverse, and ultimately less wondrous place. And so, as we stand at the shore and look out at the waves, we owe these ancient predators a debt of gratitude. They made the ocean what it is. They shaped the world we inherited. And their legacy lives on, in every living creature that swims, crawls, or floats in the sea. The deadliest waters. The most dangerous place on Earth. The cradle of life and the arena of death. The ocean has been all of these things, and more, for over 500 million years. And it will continue to be all of these things for millions of years to come. Long after we are gone. Long after the last echo of human civilization has faded from the geological record. The ocean will endure. The predators will return. And the ancient arms race between hunter and hunted will continue, as it always has, in the dark and the deep and the cold. That is the story of the deadliest waters. That is the story of the ocean's apex predators. And that is the story of life itself. The deep is calling. And in the deep, something is always hunting. Something has always been hunting. And something always will be.